Hello everyone, and welcome to Now You're Playing with Power, a Nintendo podcast to Now You're Playing with Power, a Nintendo podcast. Now You're Playing with Power, a Nintendo podcast. My name is Nbz, and we are up to episode 15. That's quite a good chunk. My name is Nbz, and we're here at episode 26. And this, my friends, is episode 34. That's a solid, nice, chunky number. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host. It's Bally. Hey, Bally, how you doing?
Good evening, Nbz. Talking of midlife crises, we have a new government in this country. I'm here, Nbz. I've successfully gotten through the Brussels lockdown.
You know what they say, Nbz?
What do they say?
Friends are like angels.
Okay.
You don't always see them, but they're always there.
Ah, I love
and
that.
this time, you're here.
Exactly. Absolutely. Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life. Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life. Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life. My name is Nbz, and this here is episode 88. Bally, again the DeLorean, we're going to the future, and we're here at episode 105 of this fine show. Episode 165. My name is Nbz, and I'm joined by Bally. How are you, Bally?
I'm doing very well. Yeah, we get darker mornings. No, lighter mornings, darker afternoons.
Bally, how are you feeling now that your future self will be married? Do you think he'll have figured it out yet? Do you think he'll be settled in with his brain about how it's working?
Figured it out, yeah, that's the question. I don't know. I'm feeling good about it. I think it'll be we're doing a small ceremony. Well, basically, me and Caroline have had a baby.
Holy shit, it's a child. A real live baby.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 261. My name is Nbz. And on the 20th of November 2013, I was sitting there in my Glasgow University room on my old computer with a really bad headphone microphone that I had owned for like 6 years. And I decided to chat to my friend over Skype on the internet about Nintendo games.
There we go.
Today is the 20th of November 2023, marking this as the 10-year anniversary of Bally and I getting onto Skype every 2 weeks and talking about Nintendo video games. I'm joined, of course, as always, by the man who somehow stuck around for this long. Bally, welcome to the show.
Oh, what a landmark. What a date, the way that the dates just married up. And yeah, you were in Glasgow. I was in London at that point.
Do you remember where you were sitting? Like, what was the place you were looking at, your computer?
Yeah, so I had been at University in Aberdeen. I was doing a master's in London, and I went from like quite a spacious flat in Aberdeen to a shoebox in Islington in London, on like, was it like Graham Street or something? I can't remember.
Okay.
But yeah, it was just a very big change of life for me at that point in time. And yeah, I was just in London. So I was in England, you're in Scotland, and now we've swapped. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yes, over many different things happening back and forth. It's been.
We've lived in I must have had like 8 to 10 addresses in the time of this podcast. Maybe
crazy.
Slightly fewer than that. At least six or seven addresses.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I remember when we talked about unpacking, you were like, it made me think about how many times I've moved in the last few years.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, over the course of the last 10 years is probably quite a lot.
Obviously, like, lived in Brussels in that time.
Yep.
I think because I was newly single, like, in the summer of 2013. And then Caroline and I started going out in 2016.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, now we're married and now we have a baby. So it's all kind of like a 10-year cycle on my whole relationship status as well, which is very strange.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been a long time, and we're going to do a little bit of navel gazing, I guess, in this episode. People have written in with some stuff, and we'll get some clips and things in. Bit of a clip show, maybe, to some degree, with some fun stuff, as well as a fun surprise at the end, so stay tuned for that stuff. But Bally, what is today's show going to be all about?
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, and then, as Nbz mentioned, we're going to do some reminiscing in the second segment. Got some audio clips as well to throw in. Thank you to the listeners for sending some of your favorite clips. Well, telling us about some of your favorite moments. We found the clips, obviously.
Yes.
But, so we'll cover those in the second segment.
Absolutely. But let's get on with it. Let's talk about a game that is as old as this fucking podcast.
Let's
Mario
talk about a game
Kart
that's
8.
a decade old.
Yup.
Couldn't be more perfect.
It's like we're actually older than Mario Kart 8 by like a year or so. But I think it was 2014 when it originally came out.
Yeah.
And here we are, Bally, finally. It's just so funny how these things work out, right? We're finally here at our 10-year episode, and Mario Kart 8 is also like, I'm fucking done. I'm finally
final
finished.
wave of DLC.
Yeah, last wave of DLC has happened. And we played it. Played a little bit with the community as well. Folks jumped on Discord, which was fun. And yeah, this is the end of the additional tracks, most of which came from Mario Kart Tour, but also some ones from the past entries. And I thought at this point we had every single Rainbow Road in the game. I think that's not the case. There's still like
about
a couple
3 or
missing.
4 short, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you could make an entire GP of Rainbow Roads at this point and still have a few left over. So
you almost make an entire game of Rainbow Roads.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what we need, really, is we just need the Rainbow Road edition of Mario Kart. That's the next entry. We're looking forward to it. But Bally, how are you feeling about this end cap to the Mario Kart DLC? Do you think it's the end? Do you think you're going to be ever coming back to Mario Kart 8?
Here and there. I think when we put our minds to it and we're in the same space and we want to play a multiplayer game together, it's normally Smash Brothers above Mario Kart,
of course,
let's be honest. But I will say Mario Kart is good fun in terms of, like, I'd like to do more community stuff like on Discord with like listeners for Mario Kart, because I think it's easier to organize that kind of thing, and it was nice to get on with some listeners and play this, because people can just drop in, drop out, you just put a code out there. I think for that functionality, Mario Kart would be my go-to game, and having all these brand new tracks is a nice way to go back and just enjoy more of the things. Plus, it's got my favorite track of all time, DK Mountain.
Yeah.
So I'm always going to be a bit rose-tinted on this set of tracks, but I thought they were strong overall. I don't have strong feelings one way or another.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I am kind of like a tale of two cups in a way, where I played a tale of two cups. I played the first cup that has like the Rome one, it has the DK Mountain, it has a few that I think are cool, but like are not really, popping for me. But then the second cup was much better, right? Because the second cup has the Madrid one, which I think is actually one of the best tour tracks that I've played. It has Rosalina's Ice World from 3DS, which one I had completely forgotten about and thought was really cool, because it's got this kind of like toboggan-y thing going on. Bowser Castle 3, again, reminds me that all the Super Nintendo tracks from like a cornering perspective are always the most fun.
I love that track.
And then Wii Rainbow Road, which I think is also a good, chaotic, fun one. So I think they were kind of all bangers in the final one, but the first one was like Daisy Circuit from Wii. That's okay, I guess.
Daisy Circuit is an awful track.
It's a really bland track. There's not a lot going on with it. And then the Piranha Plant kind of underwater one, it also was like, oh, I don't really remember much about this, but it's okay.
Daisy Circuit does need a shout out, because you can see Daisy Cruiser in the sea from Daisy Circuit. I love it when they link
it's
up
taking
tracks.
a tip from Mario Sunshine, right?
Exactly,
seeing it in the background.
Exactly.
There is a fun thing where like the fountain has Luigi and Daisy in the middle of it, and they're bronze, and it's like, man, this really is like the knockoff, the second tier characters to Mario and Peach. They're just both kind of stand in the middle.
How come we've had pink, gold Peach and not bronze Daisy?
That's very true.
Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, Bronze Daisy. When's the next game?
Had Metal Mario. We've not had Bronze.
Well, they did
Luigi.
add a bunch of new characters, right? I think you were playing as Diddy Kong.
Yes.
So they added a few more there. Which, again, I find their character additions always something that's not underwhelming necessarily, but just not what I care about. But it's cool that Pauline's in there, I guess, and Diddy and Funky and all those folks are just hanging out. So, yeah, I think there's some cool stuff they're doing there. But, I mean, what kind of stood out to you from this one? I guess DK Mountain's your favorite track.
DK Mountain, yeah, definitely SNES Bowser Castle 3. Like, The cornering is fantastic. I love the glow up those tracks have had. Even on like Game Boy Advance and Super Nintendo, like I've loved the Bowser style, those traditional Bowser Castle style tracks. They've always been so sharp on the cornering, because it's basically like just right. The corners are often right angles, and there's just lots of right angles put together, and it's all the lava theme, obviously, in the castle. I'm a big fan of that stuff. And it was nice to get like Bowser Castle 3, which I think is the best of those ones. Not that I can remember all of them off the top of my head, but I definitely remember Bowser Castle 3 being one of the best.
Yeah, I think it's just like the thing that's the best thing about these kind of remasters is there are tracks, mainly from the GBA and Super Nintendo, that are just kind of like, they're essentially new tracks because the visual uplift is so ridiculous that it makes them be brand new. Now, I think some of them are tracks that will have been remastered in previous editions. Do you know if Bowser 3 has been remastered before in like a previous edition of Mario Kart, and it's just like this is an even shinier version of it, or is this like a brand new from the Super Nintendo to the Switch?
Good question. I know that almost all the Super Nintendo tracks got remasters for the Game Boy Advance version, because those games are mechanically quite similar.
Right.
After that, I'm pretty confident at least one of the Super Nintendo Bowser Castles has been remastered. I can't claim that I know if it was 3 or not, but yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, because there's definitely like, what was the GBA one that got a real big, the Ribbon Road one? That one was
right. That's a glow up.
Never been seen before, and they really just put a nice coat of paint on that.
And that was in the DLC of the Wii U game, right?
Yes,
like that was a big deal.
Was it? Yeah, I think it was, right? Because I remember us having a whole tournament back then as well, and there was all the like 200cc stuff happening around that time also. So yeah, that one's very, very cool. I thought Madrid was probably one of the better in terms of regional ones generally, because there's a few different like nods to different things. There's a nice big plaza that you go where there's a sleeping wiggler. There's the football stadium that you go through at the end. I thought generally it did a good job of like having the identity of the city, but also having enough flexibility and variance per lap. I think the ones that fall down are the ones that I'm like, I don't even know what lap I'm on, you know? Where it's just like, I'm just going through city streets and there's not much interesting happening, which I kind of felt about the Rome one. I think Rome is a really cool city and there's a lot you can do with it, but I never really thought that this one managed to pull off anything super interesting with its setting. So yeah, the ones that work for me are the ones that, like the Vancouver one from last time, the ones that lean into a more unique part of the identity of that place. Athens was a great example. Like Athens was awesome, but Rome was a letdown, and I see that's a little bit weird because they're both historical kind of classical cities.
They both had pretty big empires at one point.
Exactly. yeah, exactly. Very similar. But like I think for some reason there's always like one that's really good and then one that's really bad. And LA was really bad last time. Vancouver was really good, and this time Madrid is great, and Rome is just kind of boring. So I don't know if that's a thing where I don't really. Maybe some of these were designed earlier in Mario Kart Tour's life cycle, and some were later, and so the earlier ones are just a bit more bland, and the later ones have a bit more flavor. I'm not sure. Maybe someone who knows that game better can tell us. But how do you feel about our closing out with these kind of like regional ones? Because it's been a brand new thing for Mario Kart 8 is the whole like based on cities.
By the latter waves, I was pretty done with the city tracks, to be brutally honest. Most of them are much of a muchness in my head. Some of them I agree are standouts, but they're just so far off like my favorite Mario Kart tracks. And I'm gonna be like a Debbie Downer here and be like, isn't it a bit world breaking and a little bit, I don't know, not very Nintendo to just have like these real world places that all of a sudden we're racing around? I would just like love more fictional, silly Mushroom Kingdom style places. And I think just the sheer quantity of these tracks, like there's one in every single Grand Prix of 6 waves of DLC and 2 Grand Prix per DLC. So my maths is so bad. What am I working out here?
I think there's like
12.
12, yeah, probably.
So there's
total.
like 12 city tracks. Just feels like a lot of city tracks. I'd be happy with like 6 maybe. Like I just think it's a bit overkill at some point, because ultimately like tracks like Piranha Plant Cove that was in this DLC, I thought that was awesome. Like just a brand new track and just really innovative. And the other new tracks have been great, like the Yoshi's Island one from last time. Like there's just some really, really cool new tracks, and you just think, Would they do more new tracks if there were fewer city tracks? I don't know, but
well, it comes back to our endless debate of when is Mario Kart 9 coming, right? Or
Well,
whatever
exactly.
the sequel, whatever the
Yeah.
follow-up is to this. And clearly, I mean, they have to have been working on something like that in the background for a very long time. Haven't made a new one of these since 2014, the entire length of this show. So, you know, I feel like there's room for us to be surprised when they unveil whatever comes next, you know, on the next console.
Yes.
With the next Mario Kart. And my hope is that they're like, here we go, here's all these brand new tracks.
Yeah, if the role of these city tracks is we need to fill up more tracks for these waves of DLC, fine, I'll give them that. I'm totally happy with that. And if that means that there's going to be newer, fresher tracks in the next game that might launch with the Switch 2, who knows? Like, then fine, I'll let them off this time. I'm so happy with all the other tracks that I think it's a very minor issue in the grand scheme of like the sheer quantity of Mario Kart that we have had over this last decade.
How do you feel about the glow up of DK Mountain? What's your kind of full view on this new version of it? Are you happy with it? Are you satisfied?
It's excellent. Like I think the music remixing is maybe the thing I'm the most cross about. Like I feel like the core melody of like like I feel like that melody doesn't come through loud enough. They've remixed it with something else.
You're right. I didn't really hear it that strongly.
Yeah, and it is there. It's just not loud enough. And then I think visually it looks nice. I think that it's had a glow up. I really like the bridge at the end. So if you've played Double Dash, that is a slippy ass game. Like it handles really slippy. So then putting like this wobbly bridge at the end of Double Dash of the track on DK Mountain is a big deal. Like people would fall off that all the time. If you were DK, it was a prime place to leave your big banana. Like that's the big banana spot
God, that would fuck
on that
people
bridge.
up.
It takes up like 2/3 of the track just leaving a big banana there. So now that we're in this world where the cars grip a lot more tightly, I feel they felt they had to mix it up a bit more. So that's why it's now a wavy bridge and it's not just like a bridge. And I think it feels quite a lot wider and less slippy than it did. So that's one downside. I wanted there to be a bit more jeopardy with that final bridge. Other than that, I think it's a pretty damn good course. Like the cornering and everything, I think feels great. And I think that's partly because we're not like there's almost like a toboggan bobsleigh kind of feel to Double Dash when you're going downhill, and you felt like when you were drifting around a corner on a track like DK Mountain downhill that you're like barely holding your bumping, bobbling car on the road, and then you finally get to the bottom of the mountain just about having done these crazy bobsleigh turns, only to find like this really long bridge that people have just left items and bananas on, and then you're just bouncing along and you just about make it over the line, and everything feels a lot more controlled and like what's the word I'm looking for, like a lot more pristine now. Like
it lacks tension in this new version.
There's no tension because you are in so much more control of your car. It's not like this loose bouncing toboggan that Double Dash feels like when you're driving downhill.
And ultimately I think that's just because this game controls way better than Double Dash does.
But I think for what Double Dash goes for, combining that with a track like DK Mountain works really well and
feels like it fits the identity of that game very
totally
well.
And maybe DK Mountain doesn't massively fit Mario Kart 8, but I'm still very happy that it's here.
As soon as I started playing DK Mountain, I was like, oh, I remember this. And then I got to that part where you corner around the bottom of the mountain, and there's a giant kind of crack that I remember falling in every fucking time playing Double Dash. Same spot, and I was like, oh god, this is just bringing back nightmares of like I remember doing this track with Bally when we were kids, and I would just every time never be able to make that corner. And this time I'm like, oh, this is easy. I can make it around this corner, no problem. Because again, you're so much more in control in this track. And it's a lot easier to get to grips with. But I kind of agree with you. It kind of, in some senses, loses its identity because of that and becomes a little bit more rote and a little bit more pedestrian.
It's a bit more sterile is the word I was looking for. A bit more sterile.
Totally. And it feels like they've widened it a bit as well so that you have a bit more of an arc. To, like, I remember the tightness of that corner, and this time I'm like, it's kind of not too... I have a good amount of space to maneuver here, basically, it felt like. So maybe that's me misremembering, or maybe that is the case that they've done. I'm not sure.
You have gotten much better at driving games. Like you used to go
Yes.
backwards around tracks, and
Of
it
course.
was all sorts.
I would just be annoyed. I'd be like, I'm just gonna go backwards now, and you'd be like, no,
I missed
go
this first
real
corner. I
way."
guess I'm gonna go backwards.
Exactly, yeah, and you'd be really mad. You'd be like, why did you play
Why
the
won't
game
you
properly?
try? Why didn't you
Yeah.
try?
And I'd be like, no, because I'm never gonna win.
I'm never gonna win. I'm going backwards. I'm on strike.
Yep, exactly. I basically went on strike with racing.
After the first corner, I'm on strike.
Yeah,
going
I was
backwards.
like, fell down one pit, and I'm like, I'm done. I give up. That was basically my attitude. But yeah, no. This time, sometimes I beat Bally on courses. Rarely, but it does.
It
happen.
happens. It happens.
So yeah, and yeah, no, I like your point about the bridge as well, because the bridge, I think the thing I like what they do with bringing back courses in this game is that they find ways to build in the mechanics of Mario Kart 8 into the new ones. And so, Mario Kart 8 is very much about every time you go off a jump or you hit a little ridge, you can tap the button to get a slight little speed boost. And so the bridge having that kind of roiling feel, like the Super Nintendo Rainbow Road, when the thwomps go down and they kind of roil it, and it creates you like little waves for you to jump. Yeah, the ripples to jump. Is basically giving you a bunch of ripples to jump to make your kind of final approach to the finish line there, so that if you're right neck and neck with somebody, whoever is best at doing those little jumps should be able to win, essentially. Which I think is a nice thing that they generally do across the board here with all these courses. So I think it's a good one. Any thoughts on the Wii Rainbow Road?
It's one of those tracks where I just have impeccable muscle memory. Like you can say this for a lot of Mario Kart tracks, to be fair, but Wii Rainbow Road is definitely just, I know exactly every corner of this track. I just remember it so well. I think I played an awful lot of Mario Kart Wii at university.
Yeah, you have that's probably the most number of hours you have in a Mario Kart, I'd guess.
Ooh, contentious point there. I'm not sure. Double Dash won't be far away if it is in second place, but I think we might take it. And then Mario Kart 8 between the two versions is up there.
I feel because you did so many time trials in Mario Kart Wii, right? So
Sorry?
all the time doing time trials probably stacks up a lot in Mario Kart Wii.
I did a lot of time trials in both Wii and Double Dash, to be honest.
Okay.
What I love about Wii Rainbow Road that they've included is like the half pipes and everything were a really big deal with Wii, and the tricks where they the whole point of Wii was you were driving with the Wiimote on its side, like with your Wiimote inside the shell of the driving wheel, right?
Right.
And
yes.
so the tricks and flicking that Wiimote to get a trick, and eventually we defaulted to analog stick, nunchuck with Wiimote, and then you'd flick the Wiimote to do your tricks,
right.
And then eventually I did go down to like a GameCube pad, and you press down on the D-pad to do your trick. But the point is that game was obsessed with tricking, and tricks have now become like an inbuilt part of Mario Kart and Mario Kart 8. So the fact that they can just include all the half pipes and everything that was such a big deal about Rainbow Road Wii, and it just worked so seamlessly, I think is a real testament to how Mario Kart has evolved, especially from the Wii version. Like, it's nice that this track just seamlessly fits into this game and still feels awesome.
Yeah, I think overall, looking back on this set of DLC, I think when it was first announced, I was surprised, definitely taken aback that this is what they were doing, and also just kind of shocked at the amount of it, and then a little disappointed when they were like, well, it's mostly going to be tour tracks. But I think that amongst all the tour stuff, we have gotten a lot of great remasters of old ones, and just a few new tracks in there as well. The Yoshi's Island one being a big standout.
What? Yeah, honestly, that's amazing.
Even like the sink, like underwatery one from
cool,
the last one, like there are some fun ideas in here that they're throwing out there.
I really like this Piranha Plant one, actually. Like, I'm a big fan of that one, the Piranha Plant.
Yeah, I need to play it more because it didn't kind of rub off on me as anything memorable, but maybe I just need to go back to it and kind of recall what happened in that one. But yeah, there's definitely been some kind of diamonds in the rough, I would say, for these, and Nintendo finally, it's one of the long-running things of this podcast, finally broke us down to buy this game for a second time, which we stalwartly refused.
They deserve massive credit for that.
For years and years. And I think the nice thing about it, and the reason I was willing to do this, is with the Switch Online service, I didn't have to pay extra for it, like it's just there as a part of my thing, and so I never have to think about it. I'm just like, well, it's just part of my subscription.
But they still got extra money out of us because we did buy the game.
Yeah, they did. At least it was the cheapest Nintendo will ever give it to us for £33.
Yeah.
Wow, what an absolute bargain! Just Crazy. So yeah, I am ultimately glad that I bought this again. I think part of it is also some of those changes from the very beginning of like, when they brought this over to Switch, they're like, let's do double items instead, and let's just rework the balance. And I actually found like a Kart combo that I was comfortable with, and that the cornering was nice for me on, which I never really found in the original Mario Kart 8. If people, again, remember this podcast existed back when that first came out, go and listen to me talk about Mario Kart 8 then, and you'll hear me complaining constantly and talking about how Mario Kart 7 is superior in every way, all that sort of stuff, because I had lots of little nitpicks and annoyances with the original version of 8. But we're at a point now where the Switch version has kind of really fixed all of my problems and has given it every single track under the sun. So it's almost, you can't really debate that it's not the best Mario Kart at this point, at least the most rich in terms of stuff, just from a pure track perspective.
But if you want that toboggan downhill, I cannot control my cart wild ride, it's still not getting past Double Dash.
No, of course not.
That's a very unique feel that I'm requesting. But
like Double Dash was I think it's the last of its era of like Mario Kart games used to control in a crazy, more unhinged way.
Yes.
And then when DS came around, they're like, okay, let's rein it in a little bit. I think DS was the start of like, this is the modern feel of Mario Kart, and they just kind of...
Really? I'd argue it was 7, because DS you still had snaking, and then snaking was gone for 7.
But I do remember when I played DS, and again, remember, I'm terrible at Mario Kart, it just felt so much more, I felt so much more in control of my kart than I ever did on Double Dash. And I think
even with a D-pad.
With a D-pad, yes. And I think that was, it wasn't maybe I think you're right, 7 is the real start of it. Maybe Wii is the real start of it, but like those games that kind of ramping into 7 and 8 feeling the way they do today.
Wii was before 7, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
By quite a lot of years, actually.
Yes. DS. It was DS, then Wii, then 7, then 8. So, it's the end. Mario Kart is done. He's hanging up his hat.
Are we getting Mario Kart 9 day 1 Switch 2?
I really do think that it would be smart to do that. Now, Nintendo, we know, sometimes not a smart company, sometimes do things a little bit weird.
We were telling them to do more DLC for Mario Kart, like almost 5 years before the actual DLC even came.
Yeah, I was like, hey, what if you just did this when you launch it on Switch, as opposed to at the very end of the system's life cycle? Like, oh god, it's a little weird.
But I think the timing of this DLC speaks to yes, we are getting a brand new Nintendo Switch. It's so clear to see, obviously, rumors and leaks or whatever. But secondary to that, we're getting a brand new Mario Kart soon, because they would not... I feel like they would not... Why would you juice all your final numbers for Mario Kart 8 if 9's not around the corner? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely 100% guaranteed within the first year of whatever the next system is. Question is, when does it land? Because if we look at the history of what Switch was, Nintendo were very calculated in that first year of having, here is a game at launch with Zelda, then a couple of months later you get Mario Kart, a couple of months later you get ARMS, a couple of months later you get Splatoon.
Was Mario Kart not launch day?
No, it was April.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't launch day. Yeah, I'm pretty certain. Mario Kart was April, because they had a game every month, right? So they were pacing it out. So they had Mario Kart. Maybe Mario Kart was May, because they had ARMS, then Mario Kart, then Splatoon, I think was the course of it. And then they had Mario plus Rabbids that led into Odyssey and a bunch of other stuff. It was a good year, of course. But I think that is the only question, is Mario Kart the day 1 game, which would be very, very strong as a proposition, or is it a month 3 game after the system comes out? Once the early adopters are in there, then you want to start getting more kind of casual people in.
You could ask the mirror question of that about a potential 3D Mario, right? Like,
exactly.
One of them's going to be launch day.
And I think, looking at what they did with Zelda, I think Mario is 3D Mario anyway makes a lot of sense as a launch title. They haven't had a launch 3D Mario since 64, right? On a Nintendo platform. So I could see a 3D Mario being the launch title, and then a couple months later Mario Kart comes in to juice things even further. So
really? Since 64?
I think so, right? Like Sunshine wasn't launched for GameCube.
Well, you certainly got Mario Bros. U on Wii U with 2D.
Yeah, that's 2D, but not 3D. Yeah, 64 is the only 3D launch game for a Nintendo system. So yeah, I'd like to see them come back with that. That would be very, very cool. But Bally, talking of Mario in 2D, you have continued to chip away at Super Mario Brothers Wonder.
Yes.
So I wonder what you think after another couple of weeks with the game.
Yeah, so I wrapped up Wonder. I did like a couple of special world levels, and I think I got all the Wonder Seeds
Right.
basically on all the mainline levels, as
Mhm.
it were. And yeah, I think I might be a little bit hotter than I was last time, and I'm surprised because I know you had suggested Nbz that, oh well, this is how you feel about World 3. I don't
Right.
really think your opinion will change much.
Mm.
And arguably it probably hasn't. I don't know, but there was something about World 4 that really did click with me, and I felt that I think that's the one with the desert.
The desert, yeah. With you've got some of the levels that are like in the, what do you call it, the blur of the sand heat, right? And
Yes,
they appear and disappear.
yeah.
And it's a bit more overworld, kind of, not exploration necessarily, but like finding the levels a little more fun in World 4 and stuff like that.
And I just thought that the Wonder Seeds were getting stronger and stronger. I will say there are a couple where the ability kind of comes back again and again and again and doesn't always evolve in a nice way. But then you get to some of the later worlds and there's even more new ideas. And I think the way that the game leads to the final battle and everything around that was another highlight for me. Like I actually
that entire kind of last segment of like 4 levels leading up to the end is just has a lot of cool ideas stuffed into that, even that small stretch there.
Yeah, and I think the game does a really good job of aesthetically doing nothing that's too similar to previous 2D Mario. Like I feel like, yes, I just talked about a desert, but the desert did not feel like dry desert in its aesthetic. It felt very different. And then I think the other worlds are like a mine, and then there's like magma underground, and then I think the whole Bowser final area aesthetic is very sort of like a nuclear reaction kind of thing they're going for. So it's all, my point is like they have successfully moved away from the tropes of here's the water world, the desert world, the green hills world, the magma world, although there's a slight kind of magma world. But my point is like they have moved away from a lot of those things in a way that does feel fresh even before you get to the structure of the game, the abilities, and crucially the Wonder Seeds. And I think I didn't fully grasp that in the first 3 worlds, even though I do think those first 3 worlds also feel quite aesthetically different. Like I think they've done a good job in making this game feel different. And
also the names are good. Fluff Puff Peaks just sounds good to say.
Fantastic. And yeah, I think my criticism of the game remains at that it's the core things that 2D Mario does that Mario still handles in a way that I want to see change and evolve in the way that I would argue the 3D games have. And I think that I still have very mixed feelings about the badges. Was
there one that you kind of locked into for the end of the game?
Yeah, like you, I definitely appreciated that spin jump thing.
Yes.
And before that, I liked the glide one where he glides using his
parachute.
Yeah. I think I would have liked to have just seen the badges as more abilities within levels and then more and push those abilities within those levels further. I think that's a better way, arguably, of...
Yeah, I mean, like, the special levels kind of do that, so you might have, not doing all those special levels means that you kind of miss out on some of those harder challenges alongside the badges, because they almost... Okay, maybe they don't require badges, but they definitely will help in some of those special levels, and they're kind of built around one idea. So, yeah, I don't know.
But I feel like they're built around one idea, they're not built around one badge. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like I would have liked to just have seen badges become new ideas, and I love the levels that are designed specifically for a badge.
Yeah, the advanced badge levels are all really good, I think.
Right. But I just wanted a better... It's very strange the way that something is either a badge, a Wonder Seed ability, or a regular ability. I just don't massively feel like there needs to be 3 tiers. I would have liked probably more so the 2 tiers and merging more the standard abilities with badges, and then obviously the Wonder Seed abilities can be something a bit more different and weird. And yeah, it's a harsh criticism because Mario controls the way Mario controls. I do stand by. I do think they've innovated more in the 3D space when it comes to the way that Mario handles himself. Like I think stuff like Cappy and Flood and even like the spin jump in Mario Galaxy, all those games have very distinctive ways that Mario controls, and they don't feel tethered to, oh, Mario has to jump in this specific type of way like he does in the 2D games. That's a minor criticism in the grand scheme of things, because I do think this game innovates and goes above and beyond any of the other 2D experiences. And my God, it's frustrating listening to people saying like, yeah, this game's probably close to Mario Brothers 3 and Super Mario World, when for me, it's leagues and leagues leagues and leagues beyond those two games. And I think it's so fresh that this is where 2D Mario is now. Mm-hmm. And I'll also be honest, had this been a year that wasn't 2023, I probably would go back and 100% this game.
Right.
I do think I should say that, because I do think, for those who don't know, I'm racing against time at the moment a little bit with Tears of the Kingdom.
Trying to finish Zelda with any time you have left, yeah.
Yeah, and there were a lot of games that came out this year that were actually much longer than I had anticipated. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at you, Pikmin 4, which took me 40 hours. Yeah. So games like that have meant that I want to sink a lot more time at this end of year period into Tears of the Kingdom and games like Spider-Man 2 and these kind of games. And 2D Mario is kind of like a rung or two below those types of games for me, but I still really, really loved my experience with this game. And yeah, I'm really, really fascinated, like, what is the future of 2D Mario? I'm interested, like, how this does in, like, end of year discussions and game of the year.
I mean, yeah, we'll probably talk about it, coming up, but yeah, it is nominated for Jeff Keighley's Game Awards.
It did get in there, totally. And I think it's nice that a 2D platformer can do that, and
it's kind of surprising to me. I did not expect it to be the case, but yeah. It's made it.
It is difficult where, for me, Mario is still the king of 3D platformers, and I think he's never had that crown for me in the 2D space, and I think for a lot of gamers, he does have that crown as like the king of 2D platformers, and I think this game definitely makes him closer to that crown than he was before, and I want to give him credit for that. I think this is a very, very, very good game, and I do think my feelings are maybe a bit more positive than last time. Yeah, I really love like the way that levels change, especially the Wonder Seeds. Some of the Wonder Seeds are so much stronger than others, but if you could craft something that had... If you could just take the highs of this game, and I'm not talking about from a pacing area, I'm talking about from a pure quality. Some of the best Wonder Seeds in this game are so innovative and fresh feeling, and I would say that a game like Odyssey is slightly stronger when it comes to like taking an idea, running with it, and then moving on to something new. And the way that things repeat themselves in Odyssey, I think, is done a little more... They have a little more restraint on that area than this game. I think this game is a little bit happy on occasion to be like, all right, and we'll give you that ability again, and here we go, here's another level where you would do that. And often those levels are quite close together. I feel like Odyssey would be like, right, here's the world where you use this ability, and then in the final end game challenge run, we'll make you use it one more time or something. I feel like that would be a better balance. But
yeah, I guess the structure of Odyssey lends itself to that more, because like in the wooded area with the surf rock, you have the guys, the little leaf guys who have the long legs that you can push yourself up.
Legs,
extend legs, and then you will never find those again in their other worlds, because it's only tied to that specific world, right? So it's kind of built around each space having its one enemy, and there's definitely levels in here that do that, like the the enemies, the guys who kind of crunch blocks, they just kind of move across the screen and they just eat blocks. I think those guys only show up in that fourth world, that kind of desert world, and then don't really appear anywhere else in the rest of the game. So there's a little bit of that, but yeah, it's funny because there is definitely a lot of Odyssey influence on this game. Like Mario turns into other creatures and you control him differently when that happens, right? One of my favorites is the Goomba transformation. You can't really jump and you have to hide like a stealth game behind the trees.
I love that, and I have unlocked the special world level for that. I've just not done it yet.
That's one of the trickier ones, definitely. It's good fun, but yeah, definitely a trickier one. And the new enemies, the Mormors that they introduced there as well, the combination of that with the Goombas, where they become these terrifying things that will eat you unless you hide behind the tree. Like, I think that's just a great kind of example of a Wonderflower idea just being put to the max with its brand new enemy in this new location and this new mechanic of hiding behind trees. Like, that is the peak of what this game does, I think. And I think, it does a lot of that, which I was super surprised by and very happy with. So
yeah, I agree. Those peaks, I want a game that's just the peaks. And I think that it is doable with this team. I do think a sequel to this game could nail a lot of that stuff, and it could be the classic, less impactful, stronger game overall sequel.
Yes,
I would happily see from this game. It's some of that innovative stuff, especially the Goomba, and it's really funny in the moment. And when I'm moaning about the way Mario controls, just the fact that you're just controlling something completely different, like in Odyssey, that is a really fresh take for 2D Mario that I loved about this game. I do think I wanted one or two more hidden abilities for the end game, and they were very vocal about Elephant Mario, Bubble Mario.
There's four. There's really four power-ups, because when you do those kind of arena segments where you have to kill enemies quickly, you have the four pipes giving you the four abilities, and those are the only ones in the game: Drill, Bubble, Elephant, and Fire Flower. And there's nothing else really.
I wouldn't say any. I wouldn't. Yes, Elephant ability is great for social media. I'm not convinced otherwise. I don't understand what's so great about it.
I really liked it from a it's kind of like a melee ability, right?
I guess
it's like his trunk is a punch essentially, and so Mario can approach. I found Elephant super helpful in certain of those combat challenges, because it was faster to jump in the air, slap them out of the air, and then move on to the next enemy, as opposed to jump on top to kill them, right? So I found that super helpful. I'd say those were probably my least favorite part of the game from a level standpoint overall. Every time I got to one where it's all right, do it in under 70 seconds to get all 3 purple coins, I was like, oh, fine, I'm just have to figure out what each room is and then not make a mistake so I lose 5 seconds. And I hate time challenges, and I think the quote-unquote combat in Mario is the weakest aspect of those games. You just jump on people. So designing challenges just around killing enemies, kill rooms, I thought was just really
didn't enjoy those either.
And they didn't need to have them. And we haven't talked about the bosses yet, which we keep forgetting to talk about, but I do think the bosses are just kind of a little weak overall. I enjoyed the final boss. I thought
final
it was
boss is fantastic. I can't think of a better 2D Mario boss. Now, it's a low bar, I'll give you that.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I really enjoyed that. I just want to say one more thing about the abilities, and maybe this is a crutch they've leaned on with 2D Mario that I'd like to see them remove, that they come close to removing in this game, and maybe the badges are a hint at where this could go. If you have a level that is designed and it can only be beaten by, let's say, Elephant Mario, they don't do levels where you can only beat them as Elephant Mario, because if you get hit and you're Elephant Mario, you become Super Mario. So my point is, the Wonder Seeds and the badges allow them to subvert to this problem. They say, right, now you're Goomba Mario. When Goomba Mario's hit, he doesn't become Super Mario. He becomes, I think he becomes like mini Goomba Mario and then dies.
No, you just die.
Or you just die
in one hit.
Exactly. Yeah. So my point is, what if, and keep talking radical terms here, they need to get rid of the abilities, and they need to lean more into the badges and more into the Wonder Seeds. Or
even just a radical redesign of how Mario works, which I know is blasphemous, but what if you didn't shrink when you got hit? What if you just took a hit and you had 3 hearts or something?
The need to go from Mario to Super Mario to having an ability defeats the point of having those abilities.
Sure. Or if you got hit, you turned into mini Elephant Mario, right? You were always Elephant Mario, and your one hit just makes you smaller Elephant Mario, but you still have all the abilities.
And let's say the ability you need is something water related, or the punch with the trunk. Exactly. But there's none of that. And
yeah, that's taking the 3D kind of perspective of in Mario 64 introduced the idea of a health bar essentially, right? And there wasn't any regular Mario and Super Mario, it was just Mario, and he took hits based on a health bar. And I think that's one of those things that Nintendo are it's a sacrosanct thing, and that's why they will never change it. Going from Little Mario to Big Mario is such an iconic part of Mario's identity as a character in the 2D space that I don't think they will ever change it. I think it would be cool if they did, but I really don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of where the 3D series just has a lot more open reins than the 2D, unfortunately. But,
yes, it feels like it's less constrained in that way.
Yeah. And it feels like the designers were told, you have to have these abilities. And they've said, okay, well, can we work around them with the Wonder Seeds and the badges? And some higher up in Nintendo's been like, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. You can. We'll merge the two. It just feels very weird that all three are in the game, and you're right. It's not going to change anytime soon. I'm not a video game designer, even though they allowed me that power with Mario Maker. But,
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I do think the abilities actually hold back Mario in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
The way that some of those badges, just to spoil one of the badges,
Mm-hmm.
like the Spider-Man badge, is just wild.
The grappling hook.
The grappling hook. Like,
yes, yeah.
Like, imagine that's not just a badge, and there's the few levels that are designed around that Spider-Man thing were awesome. I enjoyed it, but then I thought, I'm not really going to use this in a regular level because the use case is so precise. But if you just gave me more levels where I'm doing this web slinging,
Well,
I'd
you have to do
enjoy
it.
that.
Yeah, totally.
So I think the game is hinting at so much more greatness than it's already shown, even though I do think this game has some incredible highs. So I do think this game will do well on my Game of the Year list, and we'll see how it does in December. But yeah. It's really cool to see 2D Mario go in this direction, and it's almost on the upper echelon of 2D platformers. But
I love it. I think it's really good, and it is so rare for me, and I never want 100% 2D Mario games. There's just something about them, but like this one just had the right concoction for me, and part of that is how snappy the levels are. Like, if you run from end to end with a level, you can beat it in 30 seconds. Like, these are short levels. There's a bite-sized nature to them that if you're not going around hitting every enemy, collecting every coin, if you want to go back through and be like, oh, I just need the middle purple coin, it might take you 40 seconds to do it. It's not long, and it's very approachable from a collector standpoint. I think that's a really important factor. They designed this as a game saying, you should try and 100% this. The purpose of the game is to try and 100% it because of the tightness of the design and how easy it is to jump in and collect stuff. I do wish that they lent a little bit more modern, like Celeste, where you just jump into the thing, collect the strawberry, and you can just exit and you still have it. You still have to, if you collected it, finish the level to count it as collected.
Right, yeah.
But I do appreciate the update of, like, you can jump over a pit, collect the purple coin, and if you die, then respawn, then you still have it, and you don't have to collect it again. Like, it gets away from the bullshit of Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo, where it's like, you have to collect every single thing in every level, 100% in one run of it, basically. And that is my least favorite thing. And this just adds so much more approachability to doing the 100% that I was very, very on board to just go ahead and do it. And yeah, I think, again, Bally, if you had a hyperbolic time chamber to sit in, I think you would really enjoy going through and finishing off the purple coins and doing all the special levels, because there's really good fun stuff in there. So yeah.
And it's nice that Nintendo are aware of, like, you need to mark something on the level to say you've cleared it, and just helping you to make that process easier.
Having that check mark is really nice as well, because you know where there's a secret exit or what levels have secret exits, because if you have the top of the flagpole, all 3 coins, and the Wonder Seeds, and it still doesn't have the check mark behind it, that is a tell that there's a secret exit in the level. And then you can equip the sensor badge, and that will help point you in the direction of where the secret exit might be. So it feels like, even though I did look up stuff because I was like, I just want to quickly know where things are.
Yeah, I looked up a couple of things.
Yeah, you can definitely just do it within the game itself and figure out where all those things are. So, yeah, it's great. It's like when they added the that sensor stuff to, like, the fucking Samus Returns on 3DS, and they kept it for Dread, where it's like, ping this thing and it will help you figure out where all the secrets are, where all the upgrades are. I think Nintendo getting a bit better at that, at, like, letting people find stuff
totally
with, help basically within their games. So good stuff. Well, yeah, we'll talk more about Super Mario Brothers Wonder at the end of the year. But Bally, one more little thing. So I don't know, where do I start with this? So I
don't even know what this is about to be, by the way.
so I've been meaning to, like, get back to, like, playing stuff on my Steam Deck for a while, right? And recently John from Good Vibes Gaming did a video on Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. Okay, now this is a game that came out on the Nintendo Wii, that is heralded by a lot of people as, like, one of the best Prince of Persia games. And I'm a bit of Prince of Persia mood. We've got the new game coming out in January. And I'm like, I want to play this game, but I want to play it on my Steam Deck, okay? Really want to play this game on my Steam Deck, and I can figure it out. I can do all the configuration, all that sort of stuff. Here's the problem. So, couple of months ago, the hard drive that I used. Now, here's the thing. Transferring games to Steam Deck, bit of an ordeal because it's a Linux machine, and Linux is a totally separate operating system to Windows, to Apple. It's a third leg, basically, in the OS race. And you cannot take an SD card and just take it from a Linux thing and plug it into a Windows machine and have it recognize it. It just doesn't work. I think there might be some weird software solution to do it, but it's too complicated for me. I didn't want to do it. So all I've been using is a hard drive. So I go to my hard drive, plug it into my computer, load on all of my definitely legal games on there, and then unplug it, and then plug it into the Steam Deck, and load all of my legal games onto my Steam Deck, of course, all up on the up. My hard drive, a couple of months ago, basically stopped spinning. The disk just stopped spinning. I was like, what's going on? I plugged it in, nothing was working. It had always had a bit of issues. It always had problems recognizing PCs and like firmware stuff I kept updating. It was a bad hard drive, basically. It was a Seagate one. Had it from a while ago. The other reason this came up is because obviously we're looking for clips and stuff from past episodes, and I'm like, fuck, I think I've got a bunch of stuff on that old hard drive and I can't access it anymore. So for a while now, I've just been sitting here being like, well, I want to play emulation stuff on my Steam Deck and put new stuff on there, but it's too much of an effort to go through the whole other process of doing it. I figured out another process of doing it before, which is basically using like a local server network on your PC, basically having your PC talk to Steam Deck over the internet and do file transfer over there. So I'd basically drop it into a folder and it would appear in both places at once. I'd download a bunch of software to do this, and I was successfully able to do that, to put stuff on my Steam Deck. But then I tried it again recently and I was like, oh, this has been updated. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, it's a goddamn mess. So for ages I've been like, I just need to buy like a hard drive, and then yesterday I was messaging Nick on Discord and I was like, do you have like an external drive SSD? And he's like, yeah, I bought this SSD. And I'm like, perfect, I need an SSD, because the problem with regular hard drives, Bally, is they have physical parts, right? So they spin and spin, and eventually the disk fucks up and then you lose everything. SSDs, they don't got that. The solid state drive, right? It's much easier. And also, they're tiny. This drive that I have is like a tiny little square. It's very portable, very accessible. It's 1 terabyte. So Nick was like, yeah, this is the one I have. I use it for transferring stuff to Steam Deck. It works fine. And so I bought that. So here's the thing. I expected this thing to arrive on Monday. So my plan was, I've taken a few days off. So I've got this weekend and like Tuesday off as well, up until Tuesday off. So my plan was, okay, Monday, it's going to be great. I'm going to get this hard drive in and I'm going to figure out what's going on with Steam Deck. So this morning I wake up. I've been very tired this week. We've been chatting about that. We're both very tired this week. So I wake up this morning at 10:50, almost 11 a.m. Full fucking lie-in. Like I've slept for like 11 hours straight. It was a good sleep. Jesus. Very nice. But I wake up. Yeah, I fucking needed it. I was exhausted. So I wake up and I go down to the toilet, as you know I always do, right in the morning. I usually take at least half an hour to 40 minutes in the toilet. If you've not listened to this podcast the last 10 years, that is what I do.
Grab the Game Boy, grab Pokemon Blue, let's
exactly, go. Absolutely. Have my magazines, O&M on the floor, right? That's the fucking peak. But okay, I'm on the toilet and I get a message on my phone, Amazon, your package is 8 stops away. And I'm like, shit, I have just started a dump and I know I'm going to be here for 30 to 40 minutes. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking, you know the map they have? They have the map of like,
yeah, I know.
Okay, here's what's happening. They're going this way. I'm looking at the map. I'm like, okay, do I need to push for my second round? Because the way that I go to the toilet, apologies, this is like a... not a thingy warning, trigger warning to some degree. If you don't want to listen to...
This is funny because Nbz moans to me that other podcasts talk, not to name any names, Fire Escape Cast, talk about poop way too much.
Yes, but no, this is the process of just how, I'm not going to talk about the actual deed, but it's the process, right? As I have 2 rounds, like round 1, and then I have to wait until round 2. That's why I spend so long on the toilet. Anyway,
right.
And it just takes a while. But so I'm looking at this map and it looks like the truck, because this is what happens. It's like, here's your window, 10:30 until 1:30. I'm like, okay, so it's a 3-hour window. It's like 11 a.m. now. It's just within the start of the window. They never get here on time. It never fucking happens. So I'm looking at the map and I see him and a little car. It's like, oh, it's moving away. I thought it was like going down the road towards me, but then it looked like he was moving away. So I closed my phone. I'm like, I'll be fine. I can just sit here and just take a dump. And then like 10 minutes go by and I'm like, I'm getting close to being done, but I'm not quite there. And the fucking doorbell rings. And Bally, I tell you, never in my life have I more quickly grabbed toilet paper, rubbed my ass, like I did it like 3 times quickly, and then just like grabbed my pajamas, just put them on, unlocked the door, ran to my fucking door, opened it, grabbed the package, and then ran fucking straight back into the toilet to finish. So,
I noticed how in that list there was no wash your hands.
no, there wasn't. I didn't wash my hands. I just fucking opened the door, grabbed the package from the guy, said thank you, shut it, and went back again.
Poor Amazon driver.
Yeah, he does. It's fine. I didn't touch his hands. I just took the package off of him, so it's all on the package. So,
Okay.
So yeah.
Is
Anyway,
the package being disposed of?
Yeah. Well, actually, no. I think it is downstairs. I need to put it. I just need to throw it in the bin. Anyway, because I knew this is the fucking thing with these packages, right? If you don't get it, and with these delivery people, they'll stand there for not very long. So I was like, I have a small window to like fucking get there and get this thing. So I just absolutely dashed for it, and thankfully got it because I didn't want it to be like they're probably not going to deliver on Sunday, and then I won't get it. Because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I can do it today. I can sort all my shit out. So finally, I get out of the toilet and then I open it and I'm like, all right, let's do it. Now, finally, I can download Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands, put it on this drive, load it up on my Steam Deck. And so I do it. I start downloading it. I go on there, open up my Steam Deck. I click on Emulation Station. It doesn't open. I'm like, what the fuck? What's going on here? Click it again. Nope, doesn't load. Doesn't load up at all. I'm like, I was using this like 2 weeks ago. What the fuck? Why is it not working now? And I had no idea what was going on, so I went online and started looking up guides, what the hell I need to do, and it's like, okay, you can there's a new version of Emulation Station that got added like 3-4 months ago, so I was like, fine, I'll just update to that new version, get it all sorted, and I did. I loaded it all up, got it updated, and then I opened it, and it was working again. I was like, great, this is good, this is all working. Then I go to click a game. I was like, I'll see if Golden Sun works. Click on Golden Sun. Doesn't load the game up. I'm like, fuck. Because I've neglected... Here's the thing, okay? This, Bally, is why you will never buy a Steam Deck and why it's probably the worst idea possible. If you don't keep on top of this shit, if you're not updating your stuff constantly and, you know, keeping an eye on firmware and all that sort of stuff and what's happening and updates breaking things, especially with emulation, which is like, it's a grey area.
One update knocks onto another update.
Exactly. And you don't know where anything is. You have to wipe everything, reinstall. I just went down a rabbit hole basically today, and this was like most of today. Like, I haven't played any games really, but most of today has been like, can I fix my Steam Deck emulation shit so I can finally get this game onto my system and play it? And after a lot of kind of wrangling, I eventually figured out that in order to update, so the thing that was the problem was RetroArch. So RetroArch is one of the things I've talked about before on the show. RetroArch is like an emulation hub, which kind of governs a lot of older games, mainly Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, PS1, like the really old stuff. You know, more modern stuff like GameCube and Wii and PS2 have their own standalone emulators with Dolphin and with PCSX2. But the older games are all RetroArch, and I like to play a lot of RetroArch stuff. So my DS games weren't working, my GBA games weren't working, and my PS1 games were defaulting to a different emulator. So basically what I had to do was I had to go into my Steam Deck desktop mode, where you boot it into desktop mode. I had to click update to update every single thing, and then for some reason that made RetroArch work again, and I have no idea why. I uninstalled, reinstalled a bunch of times, and then that was all working. And then I tried the PlayStation 2 emulator, and for some reason that was giving me a thing where it's like, no, what was the word for? I can't remember. It was like a some kind of weird phrase. Was like, you can't do this because this file is missing or something. I was like, I don't know what any of this means. So again, find a Reddit thread that's like 6 months old with someone who said, okay, here's the guy. The guy was like, someone was asking, how do I do this? I'm not very technically minded. And the guy replies, and this is like 4 months ago, oh, I'm away from my computer this weekend, but I'll get back to you. And he never came back. So I never got the answer. So I was like, fucking goddamn it. But then I somehow managed to work a way around it where I switched the emulator for PS2, and so now Sly Cooper works again, but I ended up deleting all of God of War off of my Steam Deck and stuff like that, so now I've only got one PS2 game on there. Anyway, it's all kind of hopefully working now. I kind of MacGyvered it back together, and then finally I got onto Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands. And anyway, the game's really good. I'm enjoying it a lot so far, so I've only played 40 minutes or so. But the cool thing about Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands is they made different versions it was back in the era, right, where, Game Boy versions were different from, DS versions, from PlayStation 2 versions, from GameCube. They had studios making like 4 separate versions of games. They're all totally different. So the Wii version of Forgotten Sands was very different from the 360 and PS3 version. The PS3 and 360 versions are not very well thought of, whereas the Wii version is thought of as like one of the better Prince of Persia games. And I think part of the reason for that is it's got a big focus on platforming. It has this thing with the Wii remote where you move it around the screen, and the Steam Deck works with it really nicely, where the touchpads on on the Steam Deck, you use as a almost mouse cursor, like you're pointing the Wii remote. So it's very easy to use. And all the button mapping is super nice as well. So yeah, it seems like it's running pretty well, maps really nicely, and yeah, it has like a lot of voice acting and stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember Wii games, which is kind of like the era where voice acting was just starting, especially with third-party games for us. We didn't have a lot of those games when we grew up, I guess, on the Wii, but there was definitely a few out there, and this one has like a full-blown like, you know, story going on with some voice acting. I was a little surprised by that, which was cool. But yeah, so far it's been very fun in terms of, it feels like the level design holds up super well because I think often you go back to old games, you're like, oh, this feels a bit clunky, it feels a bit off. Yeah. But this one feels like super streamlined, and like everything is very well designed and thought out, and like climbing from ledge to ledge, running across walls feels really good, you know, finding secrets like with the camera perspective and everything. I'm really enjoying it so far, so I'm hopefully going to keep chipping away at it. I'll have probably some more extended thoughts a bit later on, but I just thought I would tell you my whole story of just having this idea of having this game and then the entire fucking ordeal of events to get to it, including this morning's catastrophe. So anyway, there you go. That's
yeah. I am a long way away from getting a Steam Deck or anything like it. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why.
Well, yeah, I guess like it depends what your intention is with it. You know, if your intention is like, I'm just going to download games on Steam that they say are verified, if that's your intention, then you will have no problem whatsoever. If you want to try and play GameCube games on a Steam Deck, you need to kind of understand this stuff at least a little bit in order to be prepared.
I'm sure Nintendo will add GameCube games to the Switch Online, and I'm sure they'll include Prince of Persia in that list.
Absolutely,
don't you worry.
Yes. Well, the original Prince of Persia anyway. This one is a Wii game, but
exactly.
But still, that would be good at some point. But yeah, the fucked up thing about it, Bally, is, you know, I enjoyed it. I just love doing this stuff.
That is messed up.
I love it. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna beat you. Like it's a challenge, right? It's like, how is this fucked up? Now I will use my internet Googling knowledge and like, you know, messing with stuff to figure my way around this problem. And I managed to do it. And it's very satisfying where you find that one thread from 4 years ago where someone had the idea and it's like, it fucking worked.
I mean, I do that occasionally so I do some video editing with my work, and occasionally something goes wrong and the file is some weird format, and I'm running files through different websites to convert the file into there's other things where I have had to dig down deep holes on the internet to find solutions to and I really don't enjoy the process. I agree it feels good when you sort it, but often once it's sorted, for me it doesn't feel like a victory. It's like, right, I'm back to square one, kind of like I'm back to level, as it were. Right. And then I don't know, I need more. I almost need like more reward for getting to the end goal with stuff like that. And I'm also in a position where there are far too many games for me to play with existing consoles I own. So the idea of like buying something for retro gaming purposes, like Prince of Persia on the Wii, like I'm so far off having the time and headspace to do something like that it's not.
See, the fucked up thing about it, Bally, and this is the case with most people who do this stuff, is they spend more time and enjoy it more just tinkering with it than actually playing games.
I know, but I mean, in their defense, we have spent more time on the activity log on the 3DS than we have playing most 3DS games.
Yeah,
so
it's
a similar circle.
Yeah, exactly, kind of a lot easier to approach, but I enjoy the process of just making sure stuff works, and then once it all works, then you just put it away and you don't use it again for 3 years, and then you repeat the process 3 years later. But no, I do really want to. I just want to go and find some more games that I want to check out and pop onto this thing, and just that part of the process as well is like, can I make the controls how I want them to? Like, I just unlocked the ability to roll, or at least they told me how to roll in the game, and it's set to down on the D-pad. I'm like, I'm not doing that, so I rebound down on the D-pad to the back. You know, the 4 back buttons the Steam Deck has?
Yes.
They're kind of like the, the Elite controller has like those paddles, yeah. So I bound the roll to one of those back buttons, and I'm like, this is much better. Customizing the experience to what I personally want. I think that's... If you're that type of person, then this is the kind of device for you. But this is my ongoing journey of playing old Nintendo games on a handheld PC hardware. So it's been a fun time. I'll continue to chip away at it. But that is going to do us for our first segment. We will be back, though, after the break to look back on 10 years of this here podcast. See you in a bit. All right, everybody, welcome back to the second half of today's show. So it's been 10 years that we've done this
10
podcast.
years.
It's been a long time, and I don't know if we really have much of a structure here necessarily. We've got some comments to go through, we've got some stuff to do. But I don't know. I'm interested, Bally, in your feelings after 10 years of doing this show. There's a lot of idiosyncrasy. What's the word? Idiosyncrasy.
You're almost there, I think. I don't want to attempt to say the word, but I do think you were almost there.
Idiosyncrasies. God damn it.
Idiosyncrasies.
Idiosyncrasies. I think idiosyncrasies is it, right? I think that's it.
I was proud of my one, but I think you might be right. I don't know.
I think it might be idiosyncrasy. Anyway, there's little things about like doing this show, right? So like,
yes.
you know, us every time that we start a segment, like we just did, we have to clap. And sometimes someone's clap's not loud enough, so we have to do an extra clap.
Do another clap. Sometimes we forget the claps entirely.
Yes, yeah. It's a rare occasion, but it does happen. Sometimes I say 3, 2, 1 to start, and Bally's like, I know which 3, 2, 1 that is. It's a clap 3, 2, 1 or a show 3, 2, 1 because they're both slightly different.
Sometimes you're like, right, let's start the show, and I go, we need to do claps.
Yeah, exactly. Now, here's another one that always comes to my brain. And here's the funny thing, right? Because I was going through, it's been kind of fun going through these old episodes to like pull out clips and stuff like that. And it's interesting to hear how voices change, how our cadence changes, all that sort of stuff. But in order to find a certain thing, I listened to the intro of like 100 episodes maybe. And every time I'm like, every time I start a show, I'm like, what do I say when I start a show? It's always the hardest thing when you start a show, right? You're like, okay, let's get into it, but I want to have something. There needs to be a jumping off point. There needs to be something to do. But there's often that point where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to say. And so it's funny because you find these little things, like what are the most common things that I talk about when I start the show? One of them is finding something with the number of the show that I then lead into something. Mm-hmm. So a couple of times, so I listened to episode 111 and episode 121, and those are only 10 episodes apart, and yet I make the same joke, it's not even a joke, I do the same comment of, it's a palindrome just like my name. And I'm like, okay, those are 10 episodes apart, but I just listened to them back to back. I'm like, oh wow, I really do have a short-term memory problem that I just forgot that I already did that bit, like, you know, however many episodes ago. Sometimes I just throw it to Bally, and then I just leave Bally to just say something.
Out here.
Exactly. I just leave Bally to come up with an anecdote or something to kick off the show. How do you feel about the intro of the show, Bally? It's always just been one of those things I constantly think about, and it's just never brought up, but it's just like, I don't know, how do you start a podcast?
I frequently have an anecdote in the chamber ready to be shot.
Okay,
but sometimes you already shot your anecdote out there, and then my anecdote has nothing to do with your anecdote, and sometimes I'll be like, I'll save that for another time, and other times I'll be like,
oh, interesting, okay.
This has nothing to do with your anecdote, I'm going to get it out anyway, and then, often a lot of weather comes into play, a lot of geography.
Yeah, with Brits, right? That's what you do, is just it's the default go-to. It's like, oh, it's hot today, oh, it's raining outside, you know, that sort of stuff. It's just... It's the thing that, you know, I think people get criticized too much for talking about the weather, if I'm honest. I think it's a valid topic to begin discussion, you know? It's a universal truth. Everybody understands it. Everybody knows it. Now, in different parts of the world, we're all going to experience weather differently. We're going to have different ways of talking about weather. I don't know what the fuck a Fahrenheit is. I never want to know. But it exists. People use it. So anyway, that's... The intro of the show has always been interesting to me.
We need to shout out someone else who's lasted 10 years.
Okay, who else has lasted 10 years?
Skype.
That is true. Shout out to Skype.
Has done, in a digital age, somehow Skype is still our means of recording 10 years on from day one.
Well, I think we should go into like why, maybe.
Why is that?
Because okay, so part of it is a familiarity comfort thing. So here's the thing, like going back since we were younger, we've always had different ways of communicating. Obviously, the first and most important way we communicated was PictoChat through a door. Every time that we went over to each other's houses.
Phoning each other's mums and asking to speak to relevant person.
Yeah, exactly. But then it really evolved with the Wii, because the Wii message board, I mean, that was the best communication tool of all time. You would send a message.
So exciting to have a glowing blue bar in the morning. Like, oh, Nbz messaged me, I've got to check.
Exactly. Come home from school, see a message. It was brilliant stuff. Eventually, Bally, we did have to grow up, and we did get MSN Messenger. You know, a very important step there.
I was definitely late to that party. I swear I was like 15 maybe. Got it. I can't remember.
Because you could do voice chat on MSN Messenger. Because I remember me and you having a Pokemon battle. You had just made a Charizard, and I remember us talking. Maybe we actually were doing on DS voice chat. That might have been DS voice chat. I think you could do that on MSN Messenger. Anyway, MSN Messenger happened for a while, and then I used a different app when I was talking to people on the internet. So the first app that I used, I don't think you ever got into it, was Ventrilo. Ventrilo was a app that I used when I talked to Magnitude and Nick and all those people back in the day. Actually, that was before Nick. I think that was just Ryan and those people. So I used Ventrilo to talk with them. And then I think soon after that, Skype became a thing. And from then, Skype was my go-to to talk to Pokemon people that I knew, to talk to you and Ali T. It was just like the default experience of, hey, you can do communication without having to phone call people over the internet in a free way. And if you had a headset, it was very easy to do. So that was when Skype came into the things. And I feel like for so many years, Skype was the program, because Discord didn't come around until like the mid 2010s, right? Really didn't
Late
become
2010s, I think.
Yeah, it didn't become a big factor until then anyway. So Skype was always the default, because it's like, this is the only communication tool out there. This is what I use on a daily basis. And so it just becomes habit, right? You just keep doing it because it's what you've always done. It's what you've always used. So that's been the case. And the reason we've stayed on Skype, I think, is because we have tried other methods, right? Discord has been attempted a few times, and we've had moments where, like, I've done shows with guests on where we've been on Discord together because it's easier for other people to do that. But more often than not, Discord will do the thing where it fucks with our audio. Now, here's a thing we always do before shows as well, is always I will double check my sound settings on Windows and put my voice quiet and loud to make sure that Windows isn't fucking with my audio. Because what happens is Windows can take that little track and it moves it up and down of its own accord. And for some reason with Discord, even when I turn off that setting, Discord still sometimes will go in and fuck around with stuff. Zoom does the same thing. I think every time that I've been on a Zoom call on my main personal computer and not my work one, I always realize that when we're recording, I'm like, oh, yep, I was on Zoom this week on some other thing. So that's why I have had to, change my settings back to what it was. Because, Zoom is now, I would say, probably a far more popular thing than Skype, just through the pandemic and everything. But it's just...
Well, Skype's morphed, it's Microsoft, right? It's just morphed into
Yes.
Teams in a way, and that's
Yes,
everything
exactly.
through Office.
Yeah, totally. But Skype, for all of its faults, for whatever the hell it has become these days, which is basically the same thing, if I'm honest. I don't have any...
If it still works, why change it?
Exactly. It doesn't fuck with us. It doesn't change my audio. It's consistent. And I think because we're both in the UK, at least, or at least close enough regionally, even when you're in Brussels, it doesn't have those connection issues, really. It's been a long time, I feel like, since we've had like bad connection issues on Skype.
Yeah, no, it's always to do with our internet. It's never to do with Skype.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a big deal.
So those are the tools of the trade. Skype, very important. And editing, also another aspect of the show that goes, I would say, unsung in a lot of ways, but we both have to do it in various different forms.
And we do edit the show. We do edit out pauses, crosstalk, obviously editing in intro music, middle music, end music. Might edit in like beep 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 is Bally from the future, something Nbz from the future, just to like clarify something. So we do go through everything. I edit Patreon show and bonus bits. And so this ThisNintendoLife and Nbz, you edit the main show.
All the main shows,
which is definitely a much bigger job.
Yeah, well, it's fun. I do enjoy the editing process, but I have found a flow at this point where you find the points at which both of us are talking across each other, and that's usually where I find my edit points, because that's when I need to move stuff around if we're talking over each other to kind of smooth it out, that sort of stuff. I feel like we've talked before about video stuff, and I think the problem with video stuff is that it lessens the impact of a tightly edited audio show, because you're just not able to peek behind the curtain, or at least to hide the curtain, I would say, in that way, because it's much more obvious in a video show when a cut happens, because you see a visual cut
Exactly,
happen.
yeah.
Versus audio, where I've made audio cuts where I'm like, no one's going to notice that. And that's always a proud moment where you make an audio cut where no one is going to realize a cut has happened. Because I often hear in other podcasts, like, cuts happen. I'm like, that was a cut. I could hear it, like, it's funny that you kind of pick up a knack for that stuff.
I think it's shaped the way we even talk sometimes. And I notice this when I'm editing, where I know you're talking over me right now, but I'm going to finish my sentence because when you're in edit, Nbz can just drag his audio to start at the end of my sentence, and we both get our points in ultimately, even if we don't hear them each in real time. Like, it makes sense on the show.
One of the funny things about that is that you realize when someone else is talking, you naturally raise your own volume.
Yeah.
So there will be moments where we're both talking at the same time. But when I edit it, you'll hear Bally start talking, then his volume goes up, and then I'll talk, and my volume goes up, and you're like, why is that? That's a bit weird. Because we were both talking at the same time, but then I separated it so it sounds a little different. But yeah, there's lots of little quirks like that that's fun. I think over the years as well, if you listen back on our first episode, right, you'll notice like the cadence is different and the way we talk is different. And Bally, you still have like a little bit of, sometimes you just pause and there's a gap and you can just edit out that pause.
I noticed this when I'm editing the show. Yeah, there's just massive pauses. Now, see, I think that pauses, I just did the pause there, they sound better than ums and the need to get an in there. And I just kind of, it's a process I've taught myself early on with podcasting, which was like, I'd rather pause, think about the thought I want to say, and then say it. And if it's really bad, Nbz will edit it out. And ultimately, if you're listening on, I don't know, 1.7 speed like I normally listen on,
you would never notice that.
That pause in the middle is even smaller. So
and you know, the fun thing is, like, recently I just leave it in because it feels more natural, and sometimes that's just a better thing to do for the flow of the conversation and to just make it sound more readable. So yeah, it was one of those funny things that, but at the very beginning you did it a lot, like every single time, and I often was like, oh, let's just just trim it together, and then it just sounds super. It's so funny because when you get rid of that gap, it sounds like the most natural thing in the world. It's like you're talking like without a gap at all. It's crazy when that happens, it's very fun. So yeah, it's a bit of the process of the show, I guess. And it hasn't changed too much, I want to say. I mean, like, when we record and our scheduling has varied a lot throughout the years.
Yeah, this is the big advantage of a two-person show in the same time zone as well. Yeah,
exactly. Where you can figure out, like, what is the gap here that makes sense that we can both be available at the same time. And yeah, I think generally, I mean, we haven't really missed episodes, so it's always worked out in some way.
And we're very good at planning ahead. We have our calendars. We will think, right, well, I've got all the future episodes in my calendar for the year ahead. So I know when holidays or one of us is away clashes with something. And it's just about identifying, right, when are we going to record? When are we going to fit this in? And we've always managed to make it work, just about.
Yeah, and I think that's the... It's the thing I learned from listening to podcasts over the years, but also just generally, I think this is advice for if you're going to be someone who makes stuff, is consistency is the most important thing above all else. You know, you will get into a habit of doing something, and if you break that, then it's a lot harder to get back to it, right? Like, you know, I want to do more YouTube video stuff, but it's always so difficult. The hardest thing is starting it, right? And it's a lot easier if you have a kind of schedule or a thing that you know you have to do, and that makes it more consistent and better in the long run.
You got a co-host telling you, Nbz, we got to record this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, right, yeah, it's not just you on your own doing the thing, because I think that's the hardest part about if you're just a solo Twitch or YouTube creator, then you're the one beholden to yourself, right, to do anything. So it becomes trickier, I would say, to get into the groove of things, but you know, a lot of people do. I did it for many years with Pokemon stuff. I had schedules of my own that I kept, and I remember doing that and making sure that it was consistent, and you know, it works, and it's good. So, but ultimately, we're just here to talk about video games and things, and that's mainly been what this show has been over the years. And there's lots of stuff that we've done, lots of things we've brought to the forefront and talked about. Is there anything, Bally, in terms of like talking about a game, is there any games that you think have suited the podcast very well from a kind of discussion standpoint?
Any specific games?
Yeah, any game or any kind of series that you think that's been a standout in terms of us talking about.
I think it can get quite hard at times to discuss good feeling mechanically driven games versus incredibly impressive narrative driven games. And I think that some of my favorite moments on the show are often when we are talking about narrative heavy games, and maybe that's not all the time, especially when it's so Nintendo focused.
Yeah,
but there are definitely exceptions, especially in the indie space. I think those have brought out the best discussions. That's not to say we've had amazing discussions talking about the mechanics and the game feel, but in a way, game feel is like describing music. It's actually really hard to articulate. It's music and game feel are two things that release dopamine in your brain, in your head, and like trying to articulate that good feeling and why something feels good, it's much harder to articulate as to why something is emotively or politically or narratively in some way impactful. And I think that's the biggest thing I've realized about genres of video games and types of storytelling and types of games and how that links to talking about them.
Yeah, interesting. I think for me, it's always, I do like talking about mechanics, and I guess that's like our kind of difference in that way, is I've always been very mechanics driven. I know you are as well, but like I think that's the thing that I grab onto, and so I love like player anecdotes. You know, I did this thing in this game, let me tell you the story about it from a gameplay perspective. Like that's always been my favorite stuff to relay. And I think what often happens in game podcasts is people very often have kind of surface level thoughts, and they never get into the nitty gritty of it. And I do like that we have the space to just be like, here's a specific example of a thing. Let me tell you a story of this thing that I did in a game, right? I think, you know, obviously the new Zelda games are just perfect for that stuff, but there's plenty of games over the years, I think, that have really lent themselves well. I think our best discussions really come from games that we've both played, right? Because you can have that back and forth and that kind of natural conversation, but also I think games we both played that we both really love. So I think Cocoon is a great recent example of that, where I was just gushing about that game, and I think we had a very good chat about it because we're able to go so in depth on it with an understanding of the mechanics and what's involved, and kind of just get deep into it, basically.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I agree. Look, those narratives around games, not the narrative of games, I agree, is a really good discussion point. Like, I did this thing in the game and going deep, and you're right. One thing we did before starting this podcast was we listened to a ton of podcasts, and I think that is valuable in identifying what are other podcasts doing that we don't like. And I think one we agree on is like so many podcasts we listen to are so surface level, and that's in the interest of what they're doing for their podcast or their website or their games coverage. They feel a need to cover all of the biggest things. Therefore, if we're always covering the biggest things, one thing is done and out the window, we move on to the next thing. Now, we try to cover a lot of things. I think as a two-person team with separate full-time jobs, we do an unbelievably good job of covering the games that we're into from both a Nintendo and non-Nintendo perspective. But I think what we have that other podcasts don't is, A, we've known each other a much longer time than most of these other co-hosts, but B, we are prepared to spend a lot of time beating that game to completion and then talking about it in depth on the show and actually really articulating why is that game so important, and then obviously that's summarized in like game of the year discussions and actually going deeper. And honestly, some of the deepest discussions on video games and other podcasts are when they're discussing game of the year, because it's basically the only time that most podcasts actually reflect on anything, whereas I'd argue we're reflecting in depth every single episode.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I do think that that's the case. And I think, like, again, a lot of this podcast is modeled after our favorite shows, like taking stuff from those shows. I mean, the clear, obvious inspiration is Radio Free Nintendo, where their show is so focused on, at least, you know, has been for a long time, on co-hosts bringing games and then spending 10 to 15 minutes just talking through that experience, right? And all the little bits and pieces that go along with it. And there weren't, and there still aren't that many shows that do that. Like, I think Into the Ether is a good example of another show that does that, but most kind of mainstream publications, like you said, their role is to play something, get a thought out about it, and then drop it, not finish it, move on to the thing that comes out next week. And
there's
it's
often-
unfortunate, I think.
It's often frustrating because those same podcasts are responsible for a lot of the hype train, like building up to some of these incredibly interesting, impactful, great games. And then when those games actually do come around, they talk about that one episode and then they move on. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Wait, you hyped this thing up for like years and years, and now you're
Right.
just disposing of it like everything. Like, I don't know. I find it frustrating, but it's totally understandable why these podcasts are the way they are and why we're different.
Yeah. It's also a balance, though, as well, right? Like, you don't want to necessarily be talking about the same thing every single time, because otherwise the audience gets bored. The audience is like, well, I want to hear about something new, right? I want to hear about something different. But I think there's a balance to be struck there, and there's definitely like, I think we're able to do that most of the time. But I guess there's lots of other stuff that we could get into. But Bally, we've had some comments from some folks about some of the various things that we have done over the years, things that people have enjoyed. So I don't know if you want to start by digging into some of those, and we can chat through some stuff.
Yeah, I put out a call on Discord for people to maybe mention some of their highlights over the last decade. And here's the first one from Tim. Says, I have one episode and one moment that come to mind right away. The first top 50 games list. So that's one thing we could talk about. It's like, wow, top 50 games. That's a big pillar of the show. Talking about reflecting on like games in a deep way. That's probably one area. And then another one Tim mentions is Bally bought an Xbox jump scare. And yeah, I was so blown away by this game. It made me like think, God, I should get an Xbox and get that second game.
Just for that game.
Yeah, so I did. I bought an Xbox. I bought an Xbox One S, and I'm here to announce it on the show.
Are you fucking kidding me right now? Did you? Wait, what?
So I was midway through Ori, and I really, the first half of Ori made me want to play Ori 2 on launch, and I thought,
motherfucker, tell me shit.
What's the best way of doing that? And I checked out online, like the Xbox One S all digital is like £170, and I was like, that's pretty cheap. Yeah, bought an Xbox, came the next day.
Fuck,
so I'm all signed up to Game Pass,
you just
ready
did
for Ori 2.
You just did the thing where I was going to be like, I just beat this game, and I'm not telling you about it beforehand.
Yeah, I took it to the next level.
You took it to the next level, Jesus Christ.
I am saving money in the long term, and I'm getting to play Ori, and I've just played like 6 hours of Forza Horizon 4, and it's fantastic.
What the fuck?
And I'd really like to play all the Halo games. So like I want to try like probably play like Halo Reach, and then try and play like them in line with you, Nbz, when like maybe ahead of Infinite or whatever. And
I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit speechless right now because you just fucking dropped this bomb out of nowhere.
Yeah, I like that one.
That, oh my God, when that happened, I was like dumbfounded because legit, like he just didn't tell me. He just went out there and bought this thing, and you know, Bally over the course of the show has turned from Nintendo fanboy to I wouldn't say Nintendo hater, but you know,
it's funny because exactly half of the show. It was spring 2018 when I bought God of War and PS4, and that was the first non-tender thing. So that's roughly 5 years, roughly half the show.
Big demarcation point, I would say.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, and then, I was like, oh, that's fine. He'll just, have a PlayStation or whatever. And then you just fucking drop that thing, and I was like, what are you talking about? Are you joking? Like, what are you talking about? And yeah, that was very surprising. I did enjoy that.
It's how my gaming habits have changed just radically. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to another point, but yeah, my habits have completely changed.
Yeah, I think I tried to do the same thing again because I was like, I bought an Oculus and it didn't quite have the same impact. But I needed to try and get my revenge somehow, but didn't. It was tricky to do. But that's definitely a fun moment, and I think a turning point in how we approach what we talk about on the show, because I think I see this as well with other shows where it's expensive to play video games and to have something new all the time. And Xbox really has revolutionized the way that we can approach conversations,
right?
Because we can
it's the
play something.
Console.
It's the podcaster's console, because you can play something on Game Pass and you can be like, by the way, it's also on Switch, so I know we're cheating here, but you can play it on the Nintendo one, so we feel legitimized by doing it.
I've done that for like over 30 games, maybe
Absolutely.
20, 25, I don't know, since buying an Xbox.
Exactly, and it means the conversation is relevant because the stuff is available on the Nintendo platform. We get a chance to talk about it and say, is it actually worth buying on that Nintendo platform if you do want to? But it also gives us the breadth and depth of knowledge of what games are coming out, mainly on the indie side, right? To just see what's happening, what's going on. And yeah, I've found that to be a big boon, I would say, overall, and just something that helps to create more depth to our conversations when it comes to end of the year as well. Games like Unpacking, what's the one, the Unsighted, stuff like that, that gets into the conversation that maybe wouldn't have otherwise, because a lot of indie games come out every year and it's hard to prioritize which ones to play and how much they cost and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's happened. I feel like it's happened across the industry. I definitely hear Guillaume on RFN talking a lot about Game Pass games and being like, oh, it's also on Switch. So we all have the same problem as podcasters, right? Of like being like, we do a Nintendo podcast, but also, hey, it's I don't want to pay
Save
for
a bit
all
of money
these.
with Game Pass for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely changed things a lot. I guess all the top 50 lists generally have been I think it was an idea. I can't remember who had the idea to begin with, but it was a fun thing of like, it's episode 50, let's do our 50 best games, and trying to mix that like nostalgia with the stuff that we had played at the time to create a list. Because I think up to that point, it might have been a struggle to start from the very beginning of the podcast to do 50 games, but by the time we had 50 episodes under our belt, you'd played enough stuff, I played enough stuff to where we'd finally be like, oh, we can actually do this now. And obviously now it's got to a point where we've played way too much stuff and it's impossible to whittle down a list.
But I think that's what's kind of indirectly made it fun. And when I say indirect, I mean it was never the intention, but 50 episodes takes 100 weeks. Mm-hmm. So every 50 episodes is almost like a year and a half. And a year and a half is actually quite a long time in video games. So there's always, even the Nintendo only list, there's always a batch of games that we have played that we love that we need to introduce into the list in some way every single time that we've done it. And I think that's the kind of value of that list I never really thought about when we first did it in episode 50. It's kind of grown arms and legs, and we've rebooted the list a few times, but there are still like our top games that have just hung in there and many games that have fallen off massively. And I think it's nice to have a time capsule of what were our opinions on Nintendo games at that point in time.
Right. And ultimately, it's a stupid... All lists are stupid. They don't make any sense.
All lists are stupid, but they're still very fun to make and fun to listen to.
Exactly. So. And that's the thing. Like, there's a sick, twisted, like, logic puzzle to doing lists, because really, can I tell you why number 46 was better than number 47? No. But, like, it's just a gut feeling of this is how... Sometimes you look at a list and you're like, well, it looks better if we put that game there, you know? Sometimes that's the decision that gets made.
But here's the wild thing, and this has been backed up by stats, and we've done a couple of surveys, but our top 50 list and many of our episodes, I've always been worried the length of this episode has just gone bananas. Like this is now, we're talking about 3, 4. Did we ever get to a 5-hour podcast?
I think our episode 200 was 5, maybe 6 hours. That's the longest we've ever done. Yeah.
Right. I was always worried, you can't do a 5. That's just stupid. You cannot do a 5-hour podcast. No one will listen. And with a couple of surveys we've done, has been backed up by people saying they love our top 50s and they do not mind how long they are. And that's not just people saying it in our surveys. It's also backed up by the podcast stats.
They are consistently the most listened to
They
episodes.
are consistently
by a good margin as well, I would say.
By a good margin. Alongside Game of the Year discussions. So turns out people still like long podcasts and people still really like lists. So
people like people arguing on the internet.
People
like
like
the best thing. And I do think we've got better about it. I think, like, again, if you go back and listen to that Wind Waker Galaxy discussion, like, some fucking knives coming out in that discussion.
Yeah, it's like knives comparing oranges to apples is ultimately, which is what video games kind of are, where there's so many different genres and types of games, and Yeah, I think we're so much better at reaching consensus and understanding each other's tastes and respecting each other's tastes.
I know, yes, a lot of lack of respect in
a lot of
those
lack of respect
lists,
early on. And yeah, I think we've gotten better at that both for top 50 lists and Game of the Year lists. I think we're good at looking for consensus when we need to.
I think so.
So I keep going with some Discord messages.
Yeah, let's do some more.
So Sully says, it would be a lot of work, but I think a smash cut of every time Nbz saying he is sick would be funny.
My name is Nbz, and I have some tissue up my nose, but that is...
The sound of your voice sounds like you have tissue up your nose. That's the best bit.
It does. Look, it has to match. I'm a little bit sick, I'm a little bit dreary, but I'm here today to present...
Would you say you've got the plague?
I might have the plague, but we'll get to that in a second. My name is Nbz, and I'm here and waiting with a hay fever in my nostrils. But that's not going to stop me from recording a podcast, I'll tell you what. I am your host, Nbz. I may sound slightly different because I'm a little bit under the weather, but hopefully Bally can pick me up because he's here as well. How are you doing, Bally?
I've got this. I'm doing well.
My name is Nbz, and my ass is on fire. I'm joined by Bally. How are you, Bally?
I'm very good, Nbz. Why is your ass on fire?
Well, I'm at my grandparents' house and just had a nice chicken curry for dinner not maybe half an hour ago, and already I feel like I need to just shit bricks. I am your host, Nbz, and the winter has truly shown its face as the coldness and the flu has begun to envelop everyone and everything, myself included. So you've got a sick me. So if I sound different, that's why this episode is, because I've come down with the lurgies, and I don't like it. And I'm not even in Scotland, where I hear it's even colder, Bally. My name is Nbz, and I have been struck, as the famous Disturbed song goes, down with the sickness, ooh, ah, 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 ah. My name is Nbz, and I'm in various states of sickness. My throat is bad, my nose is bad, I've just worked 6 days in a row. It's been a rough time, but I now have 3 days off, which is nice. I do not have the coronavirus, COVID-19, thankfully. Or maybe I do, who knows? Maybe it's latent within my system. I'm joined by other people who may or may not be infected. As always, Bally joins me. Hi, Bally.
Hello, Nbz. Have you stocked up on bog roll? I know you're going back to your YouTube days. You were a big bog roll fan.
No, I mean, I always have a perpetual cold. This is the joke, and there's always toilet paper on my desk. We have, I think, enough probably in the house. My name is Nbz, and I don't know if I sound any different, but I maybe I do, because I have been coughing up a storm. I have been having a rough time with a hay fever going to my chest and being a goddamn nightmare, and so I will probably be editing out a bunch of coughing in this episode so you don't have to listen to my horrible death throes. Unfortunately, Bally, who is hearing the live experience, will have to endure it. Bally, welcome. How are you doing? Yeah. Look, here's the thing. I'm sick all the fucking time. Part of it, I think, is I've got hay fever problems, which happens over the summer, so that always rears its ugly head. I think I just have low immunity. My body is not great, and so probably should try fixing it. But everyone has issues, right? Like, everyone has problems. You have back problems. Everyone's got issues. I just get sick often enough.
You've just got some issues that are incredibly noticeable in a podcast format.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Not beneficial to the medium of audio, where my voice is a very important part of that. So oftentimes I will just catch something and I'll be like, oh god, I just have to kind of get my way through this episode. Hopefully it doesn't sound too terrible, and for the most part I don't think it sounds terrible. The thing with audio and compression is that eventually it kind of crunches its way down to whatever megabytes we get it into to put it up on iTunes and all those places, to where you can tell, but it's never a bit of a nightmare. And usually when it's super, super bad, then we'll try and kind of organize it so that we don't have to record at that exact moment, and maybe delay it slightly to make it work out. But the funny thing is, it almost always works out timing wise, where like I get sick and then the recording is a couple of days later, or I record and then get sick, so it's just like, for whatever cosmic reason, generally the universe makes it work out in my favor.
There have been very few episodes, I mean, I think I strained my back or my neck just like so in like the last year. I think I messaged you about one of them, but there's been so few times where it's like I literally am physically incapable of podcasting right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Move the show. That's maybe happened like twice or something.
Yeah.
3 times. Like in 10 years, that's not bad.
It's pretty insane. Well, I think,
it.
part of that is from the very beginning, we're like, we're going to do every 2 weeks as opposed to weekly. And yeah, it's weird because it's such a funny thing. I find that when I listen to like Fire Escape or Frame Trap, Easy Allies kind of game podcast they talk about what they've been playing, those always feel like, oh man, it's been ages since I had one of those.
They're both fortnightly.
They're both fortnightly, yeah. And I was like, oh god, it's been a while since the last Fire Escape. And then our show, I'm like, God, we just recorded recently. Like I find the 2 weeks go so much faster for thinking about our show versus in my own podcast feed. And obviously a lot of that is like I consume that one podcast very quickly versus the however many hours goes into creating a podcast.
We're also recording on 50% of our off weeks.
That's true.
I should say, because we're doing this NintendoLife, our Patreon show. Yeah. So that does definitely take up a bit of headspace.
But even before that, even before we did that, I still felt like, oh wow, it doesn't take long to do it. So it definitely would have been a struggle, I think, to do every single week. And I know that I love shows that do that. It's my favorite type of podcast is a weekly podcast, if I'm honest. I think our show probably would grow more if it was a weekly podcast, but I prefer it to be sustainable and able to last 10 years as opposed to...
I think the reason we've gotten to this point for a decade is definitely a big part to do with the fortnightly schedule.
Absolutely.
It's really important. Especially when stuff like Bally Jr. comes along. And all of a sudden your time is eroded and fitting in games on top of recording becomes harder. So I think we future-proofed well when we made that decision.
Yeah, exactly.
2013.
It was the decision was mainly like, can Bally play enough games in 2 weeks or in 1 week? Probably not. So 2 weeks probably makes a lot of sense.
I think that's something that really impressed you early on with the podcast. Was shit, Bally stepped up the gaming.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting, right? I don't know how you feel. Like, if we stopped doing the podcast now, do you think your play habits would change in terms of what you do? Do you think you would still be like wanting to beat more games and like put them in lists and stuff like that? Do you think
still want the lists? I think I'd shove in a shorter game far less frequently. Like occasionally I'll be like, I just want to play something short,
right? Or
something extra appeals to me because it's short that I can finish, beat, talk about. And I would probably have already beaten something like Tears of the Kingdom. Because
you would have just gone straight on it and not
other
deviated.
games that I want to talk about on the show have gotten in the way, and I now do have some time to play it. But yeah, they change slightly, but not drastically. Do you think you would be any different?
I don't think I would change a single thing, and that's because I think that's because I lie. I would definitely change things, but I think that's because I've been doing it like this for so long. But what I basically was doing podcast kind of cadence for playing games before it, because I just got so obsessed with cataloging and finishing games just on my own accord, like I was doing lists of like what I had played in a year and stuff like that, and I was kind of doing it on my own just for my own fun. So I think that just carried in naturally to the podcast. I do think it would be different if we stopped today. Here's what I would do. I would stop playing every other video game. I would just buy a subscription to Final Fantasy 14, and I would do that for 6 months, and I just wouldn't play anything else. That's the honest truth. Like, I do feel
You've gone from I wouldn't change a thing to I would drop everything else to play this one game for 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. Like, the one issue with doing a podcast is you have to always be playing different stuff all the time, right? And I like doing that naturally. I do think, again, like I do think I naturally gravitate towards that way of playing games because I love a variety of experiences. It's also weirdly now kind of part of my job to be like up to date on what's happening and what is new and what's different, right?
Good point.
So that definitely is a factor. But I think that having done it for so long, I kind of look at the grass is greener on the other side, where I see so many people out there who are like, oh, it's so hard for me to play other games. I wish I could play more games than just World of Warcraft or just Overwatch that I play every day. And I look at those people, I'm like, man, if only I could just play one video game, that would be so good. Like, I could spend 300 hours just playing 14 and like get through all of it and then just play the MMO parts and just hang out in that world and just do that forever. Like, that sounds really good. So I don't know. Might be a thing eventually that we'll see what happens with the show and stuff. But I think I would like at some point to go and commit myself to a game and just do that for a long while and just not change because I think that would be kind of take me back to my Pokemon days, right? That's kind of what I did. I just played one game and just every now and again I pick up something else, but I would mainly just be a mono gamer, and I would like to kind of revisit that at some point because I think it would be good. But yeah, that's kind of how it would affect me, I guess.
So Nbz's 6-month Final Fantasy 14 sabbatical will be coming up at some point, and we'll have to work our way through that. Yeah,
it'll be very interesting.
Got a few more Discord messages here. Mirandoom says, the top 50 list where you guys argued about Octopath Traveler has always been amusing to me. Here's a contentious one. Octopath Traveler. Another game that came out since the last list.
Yeah.
For me,
I know you love
I love
Octopath
this
Traveler.
game so much. I really want it to be top 25.
I don't think it's top 25.
I know you have your issues with it.
It's not that I hate Octopath Traveler. I think that it is so incompetent in so many fucking ways that we can't reward it to be the top 25 video games of ever. Like, I can put it in bottom 25. I can't reward a game that is so fucking grind heavy, that has a story that has no coherence to it, that characters that are initially seem like they have a lot of depth but don't really go anywhere, and their stories are too short to really have good resolutions.
That battle system.
Yes, the art style is great. The battle system is fantastic. The soundtrack is phenomenal.
Oh, God.
But like it is literally like a list of amazing pros and garbage cons that like makes this such a battle in my mind. But for me, the cons drag it enough for it can't. Like, that soundtrack is fucking phenomenal. It's so good. But I just simply cannot reward it for its sins because there are many.
I get that.
There are many.
I just think it's got to be in the top 25.
No.
It's got to be.
No.
It's got to be.
No.
It's just got to be.
What? But like, what is the thing about it that?
So I actually aside from music, battle system, and art style, which I think is enough in my view to get it up there. But other than that, I did actually enjoy like the designs of some of the towns and some of the.
They all look the fucking same. Name me a town in that game. Name me one town. Give me the name of the town and what it looks like and how it's different.
Sand one that's really nice.
There's like 4 sand ones. Bally. They're all look the fucking same.
What I'm trying to say is I like some of the smaller stories that game tells, and some of the things that like Ulbricht's mission where you're suddenly fighting like these lizard monsters in this cave that's near this town. I just really like all these small fantasy driven stories across the 8 characters, and I did do all of their chapters. And
the fix here is to like give party members you're not using XP. Fucking Chrono Trigger, a game that came out 2 fucking decades before this game, did that. Like a game that, oh boy, It really annoys me when modern JRPGs do not do things that have been done and work and make sense and just.
We're gonna make a bold claim here, and this is what I'm going to get this in the top 25.
Okay,
like this is my favorite JRPG.
Are you kidding me?
I think it is.
Wow.
I honestly think it is. I think for the combination of the great good points we've said, and it's my favorite. Even at the same time, I can agree with some of the negatives of this game. Like I do think that, and remember, I've not played Chrono Trigger. I've not played Final Fantasy 7. So like this is me having played a small number of JRPGs.
Sure,
but like it just worked for me, who's always been intimidated by JRPGs and stuff like class systems, for example. I think that's something this game handles
right. Actually, the class system
well.
is really good. Yeah, I agree with that.
Wargroove's all the way down at 15.
You want to talk about fucking Octopath Traveler is 21. It doesn't deserve to be on any list at all. Octopath Traveler is like 7 games in one of Goodwill. Octopath Traveler is all. Here's the funniest thing about that comment. Bally and I, just before recording this segment, had like a 20-minute debate about leveling up in Octopath Traveler.
Like,
and arguing
James
about
got
it
debate
again.
to like the first game as well.
Oh
We're talking
my
about the
God.
second game.
The second game, sorry, yes, no, because I'm still playing through Octopath 2, and so I'm just complaining to Bally about Octopath 2 stuff, and Bally's like, well, no, you're playing the game wrong, and I'm like, well, no, I want to play it this way. So the Octopath Traveler 2 discourse, or the Octopath Traveler generally as a series discourse, I think is actually one of the cornerstones of the show.
It's not been resolved yet.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do appreciate that, and I think it definitely creates fiery discussions when one of us has a strong opinion on something, I think. I think I'm more guilty of it than you, of being like, no, this is my opinion, I'm going to stick to it. But yeah, I think it definitely drives some of the more fun moments because it means you have that back and forth. I think the thing is, like, if we hadn't known each other for such a long time, if I was just doing this with someone I'd met on the internet, I don't think I would be as comfortable going as hard
Digging in your
conversations.
heels.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think
I mean,
that's part of what
I
works.
actually think I dig my heels in just in a more subtle way.
Oh, okay.
Because
okay.
I actually think if you look back at some of these lists, I was actually just looking back at our Game of the Year list because I know you've compiled those and we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But like, kind of, I've managed to sort of quote unquote win or get the game I prefer to like number 1 over 2 in the last few years.
You have.
Like Ori over Hades.
Yeah.
Or Eastward over Metroid Dread. Or like, there's other things. My point is, like, I think sometimes I'm guilty of being like, oh, but the consensus opinion would be this.
Yeah.
And it's really, I was like, actually, I'm being slippery and trading this for this. And whereas you're like, no, Octopath has to be off the list because.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, that is true.
Different styles.
Yeah, exactly. I think it works in your favor though, because the problem is that I liked more games on those lists, and so my decision was always tougher. I'm always defending more.
Yeah.
So like I'm more passionate.
I've got more credit in the bank.
Yeah, I'm more passionate about Hades, but I still think that Ori was one of the best games that year. So I am gonna ultimately, and I think you can see that in the more recent years where you go back to 2016, our game of the year is Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, because I just dug my heels in and was like, no, this is better. Versus now where I'm like, well, what's more representative of the show, right? And I think that's the thing we think about more now is like, what is the opinion of both of us combined? Where's the combined passion?
Yeah.
And the combined passion was more behind Ori, was more behind Eastward, was more behind Luigi's Mansion 3 or whatever, right? That's where I think things have shifted somewhat. And I think it's more representative of like both of our tastes together, which ultimately ends up more in Bally's favor because it tends to lean on your side of things, I guess.
Matrai also points out the Super Mario Galaxy 2 versus Wind Waker debate, and Acerbis makes the interesting point that in retrospect, both of those games now don't rank particularly highly at all, which I think makes the whole thing even more fun.
All I'm saying is the Galaxy 2 is exceptional in that aspect. Smash 4 is exceptional in its fighting mechanics. Absolutely fucking incredible. Wind Waker is not exceptional in any individual aspect. It's solid all round, but it isn't. Wind Waker should be number 3.
Galaxy 2 should be number 3.
No, okay, why?
Because it's just not as good of a game as Wind Waker.
That's not an argument. You need to give me points. This is the problem. You're just saying it's just not as good of a game. That's
I've
not an argument
explained
about
so
it.
many
I have given you many
about
points
Wind
here
Waker.
on my side.
I'm not going to go back into it. I've explained far more points about Wind Waker than you have points about Galaxy 2.
Okay, let's add up our enjoyment of all these games. If we're going to try and make it, because this clearly is going nowhere.
Right.
We both like Galaxy 2 as a combined whole better than we both like Wind Waker.
I disagree based on the fact
No, you can't disagree because I'm
Yes,
part
I
of this
can.
discussion.
I can't disagree because I think we both like Wind Waker more so than Galaxy 2.
No, because I don't. I think Wind Waker is a great Zelda game, but it is nowhere fucking close to Galaxy 2. Galaxy 2 is one of the best games ever made on this fucking planet. Wind Waker is a great game. And that's all it is. It's a great game. Right, yeah, exactly. Like, it was such a hard-fought thing, and now, like, yeah, they're barely on the list, those games, so it was very funny.
Matrai says, hard to pick out just moments, but I think my favorite episodes are the Earthbound Backlog Club, and the various GOTY to GOTY lists and the top 15 Nintendo games you did in 2021.
Yeah, I always think about that Earthbound episode. I think it's just it's kind of a distillation of what you were talking about earlier with like narratives in games, where there's so many themes and ideas in Earthbound, but also it's an old enough game to where you can kind of, read between the lines in a way, right? Like, not a lot of it was explicit, but there's a lot of stuff that game is saying and doing in very interesting ways, but it's also just such an interesting game. It's just such a unique part of Nintendo's history and catalog. And again, part of the fun of this show is us going back and experiencing those older Nintendo franchises, definitely more in the first half of the show's run than in the second.
During the Wii U days, we've said
the
before,
Dreg days. Exactly. But yeah, I think that's a great example of a series that neither of us had any real familiarity with, core Nintendo franchise, or at least one that was a classic revered by a lot of people, coming to it to the first time in adulthood, having never played it before, and just having a kind of revelatory experience with it and really understanding like why it holds up and why people hold it in such high regard. So I think that one's definitely super cool. And I think one of the things I would like to do more in the future is, again, this whole emulation thing I'm doing with Steam Deck is going back and playing more old games, right? Like, I bought all those 3DS games. I want to go back and play more of those. I think there will be windows to do that, and I want to dedicate myself to doing more of that. Because
I'm not
I think
convinced every year is going to be 2023 when it comes to the sheer quantity of top quality games I want to play. And we've already looked at next year a little bit off mic, and I'm already convinced there's going to be gaps in that year that I'm going to be able to play some things, hopefully. Yeah,
play some more old games and get back into the swing of things, right? Because I think that is where some of the most interesting discussion comes from, is like, well, I never played this game and everyone has a great love for it, familiarity. How do we approach it in the modern era? And I think I think we're fair and honest with that stuff, because there are definitely old games that we think hold up remarkably well, and there are a lot of old games that we think hold up terribly, but everyone says is good still. And I think that we're generally pretty consistent with that. It's not like we're here saying all old games are bad, and I don't believe that at all.
No.
But I think, there are certain ones that have held up really well, and certain ones that just haven't. And I think it's cool to go back through the history books to see where we land on that stuff. So yeah, it's always fun.
Matthias shouting out GOTY to GOTY.
Isn't it GOTY T to GOTY?
GOTY T to GOTY. How can I miss out a T?
Yeah, the T, of course, representative of our good friend Ali T. Exactly. No, it's not at all. But I just...
can you explain what it is for anyone who's listening, going like, well, if you made it this far and you don't know what GOTY to GOTY is.
GOTY T to GOTY.
Did I miss out another T again?
Esquire, yes.
GOTY T to GOTY. It's games of the year that didn't actually come out that year.
Yes, exactly. So part of this was born of the fact that we were playing lots of old games, and I was like, wouldn't it be fun to like rank these? Because otherwise we're not going to reflect on all the old games that we played that year.
Everything has to be ranked somehow. You can't have games you play that don't get ranked.
Right, what's the point of playing games if you can't rank them, of course? Yeah. So I was like, hey, why don't we do this thing where we just talk about all the old games that we played, and because it's kind of a nice time capsule, and it's really interesting to rank those, because you're ranking things from 1995 versus things from 2003 versus something from 2011, and I think it's always unique, and there's always a kind of very fresh feeling kind of vibe to those lists, because they're a smorgasbord of like, what old games were we interested in playing that year. I always think about 2015 for me. I think 2015 is probably my greatest gaming year of all time from a new game and old game perspective. 2015 was the year of The Witcher 3 and Ori and the Blind Forest, two of my modern favorite games of all time. I also played Persona 4 Golden and Chrono Trigger in 2014. I think I also played Danganronpa and the Tomb Raider game, the reboot. Like, there were a lot of games.
Was Overwatch that year? Or was that later?
No, that was later. Okay. But that year always stands out to me, and you can go to our we have a list on gg.com where you can go and look at every single list, both our GOTY T to GOTY lists, but also our Game of the Year joint lists. Yeah, we'll have that in the description. It's also pinned on our Discord. You can find it.
Yeah, and we'll pin it a lot over Game of the Year stuff because it's important. But...
yeah, exactly. We update that. So you can go and look at my list from 2015 for both new and old. But like, it's just banger after banger, like back to back. And that always has stood out to me as like, that was probably my peak year in terms of new games and old games combined. It was very,
Mine
very
are
big
just
stuff.
like heavily made up of non-Nintendo games post 2018 that are just.
It's very funny looking at that list because suddenly it changes from bright colors
The
to
color
just grays.
change.
Yeah, you just see it. You're like, oh, Shadow of the Colossus and Last of Us, and like they're all grey and brown.
Here's grey, brown, grey, black, white,
exactly.
brown game.
Although,
There we
like
go.
last year seemed like it was trending a bit back in the other direction.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
here's the irony of the way that the show has evolved and the success of the Switch and the number of games that have come out this year is I'm actually short of games on my GOTY Decoti list that I've played so many new games. So we can talk about that next time. But like,
yeah,
it's a game changer.
mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, those are always fun.
Next on Discord, Emmerich says, the announcement of Bally becoming a dad has to feature. Like, there's no way it cannot. And then Declan follows up on that and says, for whatever reason, I also love the following discussion of what do you call him? Baby Bally?
Yeah.
Bally Jr. I'm not going to share like his real name on the show or anything, but I was thinking he does need a show name.
You need a reference point, you know?
But
you
here's
need a
the
nickname.
thing. If you follow like Nintendo logic, there's two options.
Okay, yeah.
You can
okay.
either
I
go
like this.
Baby Bally.
Baby Bally, yeah, that's
Or-
one option, of course.
You go the DK route and you go Bally Jr.
Yes,
Now-
these are tricky paths to navigate.
I would prefer going with Bally Jr. because as this baby becomes older
Yes.
and is no longer a baby,
Right.
see, Baby Mario is a baby for eternity. That's the thing
Yeah.
with Baby Mario. Whereas this baby is going to grow a bit older and then
That's the thing with like Baby Mario is then Baby Mario just becomes Mario. So Baby Bally can't just become Bally because then you're Bally and your child can't
Exactly.
also be
So
Bally. So
I think Bally Jr. is
Yeah.
a solid podcast name. What do you
it's
say?
pretty solid. Yeah. No, I think it's good. It carries through the years. So when this child is 30 years old, then they will still be called Bally Jr.
Exactly.
forever and eternity.
Exactly.
So, it's a good theme. It's a good way to roll things out. Yeah, it had to be Nintendo themed, of course, right? You got to pick a way of referring nickname, of course. So yeah, no, that was fun. That was it was very interesting because the way that I found out was we all were at a dinner before Bally's wedding, and Bally stood up and told the room, and all of us were on another table and no one heard or something like that, and then we all were like, "Wait, what the fuck? What just happened?" So yeah, that was very, very funny.
No one heard.
Yeah, because we were just like in a corner. I think we kind of were like, people were like, "Hey, this happened," and we're like, "Wait, what happened?" And yeah, it's like, "Oh, I'm having a baby." So that was very cool. And then obviously had your little paternity leave and doing all that with some guests as well. Which we it's one of those things that I wish we were able to get more guests on. We've had a lot of guests
Yeah.
over the years, and shout out to everyone who has lended their time to the show and been on the show. It's been great. I always enjoy having other people on the show. But yeah, it's one of those things that's interesting because I think also with our surveys, a lot of people don't really want guests on the show, which is a interesting thing. I think a lot of people, they find comfort food in like what they like and enjoy, and guests is always something that I think kind of funny struggled with as well. Like their main podcast, people were complaining there were too many guests on because they just wanted those core people talking, and that's what the format of the show was. I love having guests, and I think it's a good way to collaborate and do all that stuff, but it always gets very tricky in terms of timing and scheduling, especially because a lot of our guests are US based, or at least ones that we want to get on often. So but yeah, I appreciate everybody who has guested on the show in the past. It's been great to have lots of different voices on as well, and I'd like to do more of that in the future, but yeah, just need a bit more time, I think. But
Jasmine952 wanted to shout out, it'd be good to show away or clips of the Patreon thanks for Bally's girlfriend, then fiance, then wife, Caroline. I'm sure we could talk about the changes in our lives over the last 10 years of the podcast, and I think that's a good way of showing it. Yes, thank you to all of our patrons, but most notably our two top tier $10 tier patrons, of course, Atari Alex and my girlfriend Caroline. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much to my fiance Caroline and Atari Alex for your $10 tier support. Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my wife Caroline. Thank you all for your support.
yes,
Shout outs to Caroline. She's very patient
Absolutely.
with the show.
Yeah.
And yeah, now our current recording slot, she's asleep while I record
Yeah.
all the time
Yeah.
now. So yeah, it just works out a lot better. But yeah, shout outs to Caroline. She's put up with a lot, and like especially with Bally Jr. when he was little, and I'd have to scamper off for a bit of podcast recording or this and that and the other, and being flexible. She's put in a massive shift.
Shout out, absolutely. Lovely. Who's next?
Jackpot says, "Hey both, listener since day one, and I think my favorite aspect of the show is the specific relatability to my experience. As an early 30s millennial, I have had so many instances over the years of you guys describing mine, and I'm sure many others' experiences with certain games that feel so personal. A few examples: learning about characters through Melee, the Guitar Hero fad and its influence on your musical tastes, God, I love Paramore, etc. Don't get me started on how aligned I am on your Beatles takes. I argue with my family about this all the time, but they just don't see our side." Look at the NES, right?
Mm-hmm.
The NES.
Yeah.
Incredibly important system.
So important.
Do I want to play NES games? Not really. Are there a couple that are pretty good that I've enjoyed? Yes, but generally speaking, I don't want to play NES games. The Beatles are like The Legend of Zelda on NES.
Wow, okay,
right?
here we go.
Hugely influential. Arguably the reason Breath of the Wild exists. Hugely important for the video game industry. Do I want to play The Legend of Zelda on NES? No, I don't. Do I want to listen to the Beatles? No. Okay? Harsh? Am I being overly harsh here? But like,
I don't have a deep emotional investment. Like, they're the type of song where you walk into a supermarket and it's on in the background. And I know that's very mean, but I mean, like, there is a...
Have we got any listeners left after?
I don't think so. But like, it is a type of music that just kind of rolls off my back, if you know what I mean, right? Like, I know it's there, I know it exists, it happens. Like, I don't know about it, I'm kind of surprised you don't like the Beatles, because they are basically vanilla ice cream, right, in a lot of ways. So, like, it feels like, yeah. Yep. Oh, God. Shout out to the Beatles. The biggest punching bag of the show. No, I think that's very fun as well, because I definitely felt that when I was listening to Nintendo podcasts, or podcasts generally, everybody on those shows were people who grew up with the NES, and that was their touch point for everything, right? Mm-hmm. That was their, like, this is the best, we'll never get better than this. This was what I grew up with. And I feel like now it's different. You now have more people growing up and doing stuff. But when we first started, I was like, I feel like we're quite different because we come at the perspective of people who grew up with really the GameCube. I mean, N64 technically, but really the GameCube was just like our generation of games coming into things and like evolving with the Wii. And, that was our kind of era. And yeah, I do think that we offered like a different kind of Nintendo fandom, not being kind of obsessed with the 2D Mario games of old and all that sort of stuff.
I think that our view has become more mainstream, and I think that's to do with the age of video game podcasters, reviewers, punditry, however you want to describe it. I think there have been more people that are now our age, and when we started this, we were 22, 23. There weren't many people with our view who were working full-time or part-time in the gaming industry who were that age. So you're right, having our touchstone as the GameCube and Game Boy Advance in that era, and then obviously DS, Wii, and so on, that's what we grew up with, and was not what most of the industry grew up with then. Whereas I think there's a decent chunk of the industry now. I mean, I think a lot of our podcast circles are generally older than us, but there's a lot in that group, certainly the group I listen to, that are our age, and they did grow up with. There's even like some younger people who grew up with just the Wii's their first touch point. It's like, this feels weird.
Well, eventually I'm going to crumple into dust when someone's like, oh, I was 6 playing my Wii U, and that was my Miiverse was my nostalgia, and I'll be like, yep, okay, cool, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
So everything always catches up with everyone. I think we're lucky to be 33. Well, I'm 32. You're 31, almost 32. Yes. I think our age group is decently represented in the video game industry space, in the commentary, and I think as a result, those who grew up with the GameCube GBA is a lot more prevalent now than it was at the start of the show, and it's a good example of something that's definitely changed a lot over time.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I look forward to, hearing in the future all these young kids who who grew up with Nintendo Switch, and that was their first console, and they'll have I think like it's very interesting because really the length of this show has covered 2 Nintendo full console cycles with Wii U and with Switch. Pretty much. Like we started...
Well, we're not completed Switch yet, but yes.
No, but we started pretty much just after Wii U released, and we are we're hitting 10 years at a point where Switch is about to be done.
Yes.
So if you think about that length of time for 2 console cycles, that's GameCube and Wii from our childhood is the time we've done doing the podcast.
Yeah.
Which when you think about how long that amount of time felt from GameCube starting to the end of Wii, like it's kind of crazy. Like time is very weird, but yeah, we've been doing this a while, so definitely feels like it.
Sorry, I missed this one earlier, but I need to mention the Sonic Hero. This was from World's Boss, I should say. The Sonic Hero song being used for Triforce Heroes, with Nbz saying in the most deadpan way, still gets me. You've reflected on it once before, but I still loved how unexpected it was.
Triforce. Yeah, the funny thing about that was Bally messaged me and he's like, "You got to do this thing. You've got to do this thing."
I thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, okay, so do this thing. So we do Triforce Heroes, but you know Sonic Heroes, that song? So what you're going to do is you're going to cut out where it says Sonic and you're going to say Triforce instead. And I was like, okay, sure, I guess I'll do this thing. And so I just did it in the most like unenthused, like deadpan possible way. I was just like, Triforce, and then just like the way that it works in the song is just... It did turn out to be comedy gold, but I don't think I knew that it was going to go that way. Bally definitely had the foresight on that.
It's comedy because of the way the singer sings Sonic Heroes with so much passion and energy, and juxtaposed with obviously you being a bit more deadpan. I think it's fantastic.
I would like to do more audio bits like that. I think audio bits are fun. They take a bit more thought and work and stuff like that. But I do want to do more of that stuff because, you know, there's some shows that I listen to that put a lot more effort into having those little segments, those little bits that kind of spice things up and make the show feel a bit more premium and more fun. So I'd love to do a bit more of that. But yeah, it's just finding, you know, what are the things you're going to interject in what makes sense with the show. So yeah, that was a good fun time. I enjoyed doing that.
Flapjackal says, I think the most iconic thing is the BitTune intro. Anytime it pops up when YouTube playlist changes over, I know I'm going to be in for a good time.
It's one of those things, isn't it? I always have that comforting familiarity with podcast intros. Like, you can play me a podcast intro and I'll be like, I know exactly what show that is. I know whose voice is going to follow this song. And it becomes that, like, it's not muscle memory. It's like I don't know what you would define it as, but you just associate it.
It's the association equivalent of muscle memory for sound, I guess. Yeah. It's just there. It's just, you know what's going to happen.
Exactly. And yeah, I guess this intro we've had has been around for a long time, but we changed it from our original one, which was back when the show... We probably should talk about this as well, if people who haven't been here. We changed the name of the show like 30 episodes into the show, basically. So originally... This show was on my YouTube channel, and it was called Now You're Playing with Power - a Nintendo Podcast, because I was like, well, you know, for a podcast, if people want to find it has to have Nintendo in the name. So it became this clunky thing of it was based after the fucking Nintendo catchphrase, right? Now You're Playing with Power.
Yeah. And which I don't know. Email NYPP questions.
NYPP questions. Yeah.
How we had an email with PP in the name. Like, come on. What were we thinking?
Yeah, it was just like that Melee player, Dr. PP, just really good forethought. So, yeah, I think that the interesting part about that as well was I felt like that didn't really talk about the identity of the show either, because Now You're Playing with Power was an NES kind of era slogan. And hey, if you've listened to the show for more than 5 minutes, you know that we're not NES people, and that's not kind of our vibe. So it didn't really
Great
fit
point.
the vibe either. So we decided, let's rebrand, let's do something else. And one of the most famous podcasts in the world is This American Life. And so Bally was like, hey, what if we do This Nintendo Life? It has Nintendo in the name. It's a riff on podcasts, and it kind of works. I would say the only drawback is that Nintendo Life, the website, exists, and so it does kind of screw us on an SEO perspective, because if you search for This Nintendo Life,
they don't have a podcast anymore. They did
No.
once upon a time, but
They
not
did,
anymore.
yes. Yeah, if they ever start a podcast, we're fucked, basically. That's it. It's over. But no, yeah, we definitely, that's probably the one drawback I would say of the name, is like the association with Nintendo Life. But aside from that, I think it works, especially because we use TNL as an acronym a lot, so that
But
definitely
lucky
helps.
for us, Ali T pointed it out like half a year ago. That
Oh,
there's
yeah,
this
thanks,
website
Ali
called
T.
Nintendo Life, and it's like,
It's like,
good
by the
one.
way, guys, did you know? It's like, yes, Ali T, thank you. Always slow a little bit on the take, that boy, but good fun. Cool. I don't know. Was there something
I've got a couple more.
Okay.
Matraya says, no idea on the episode, but my favorite podcast quote is Bally saying, so I finally tried an indie game.
And Bally, how about you let us know what you've been digging into?
So, I've actually been playing an indie game. Now, I never ever. I think this is the first indie game I've ever sort of owned and played for myself. I mean, I've played some games that you've had in the past, and that game is Trying to Director's Cut.
Which is my favorite experience on Wii U, if you remember from our episode a while back when we talked about our 3 favorite experiences on the system.
Yeah, so already you're very positive about the game. I'm pretty positive too, but I'll get into that.
Yep. It's so funny to look back on how quaint that is at this point in time. I always remember it was Trying 2. Trying 2 was the game. And Bally, at that point, I think we were like about a half a year into the show, probably. You were mainly...
I'd already played like Pikmin 3, Mario 3D World, Triforce Heroes. I went back and played some new Super Mario Brothers U, Metroid Fusion, and it was like, right, Nbz recommended I play this game Trying to. I'll download it on my Wii U. This is an unusual experience. And then it was the first indie game that I had played for myself that I had downloaded, not just played briefly at your house or something.
Yeah, I think it also is the start of the list, I'll call it, of me telling you to play stuff and you being like, I'll get to it eventually, but I will do it in my orderly way, where I will go down this list.
I used to be so strict.
You're extremely strict.
So
the funniest
strict.
one was Guacamelee, because I told you so fucking long to play Guacamelee, and then eventually you played it, and then it was your game of the year that year, and I was like, I fucking told you, which was very funny.
But quality doesn't get you higher up the list. That was the thing with my list. It was like, I'm going to get... This is how I get my backlog cleared, okay? Like, it doesn't matter the quality. You don't skip the list.
Yeah, exactly.
Now my list is a bit more changeable.
Oh yeah, more flexible. I think you still have things that you're like, this is what my focus is going to be, but I think you are more open.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's important. I think you got to have some focus. But if you come along and say, Bally Cocoon is the best thing since sliced bread, I've got to be able to have the capacity to play that game. So stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Though it's funny, so I also listened to one of my favorite moments as well is us talking about your experience with Box Boy, where, you came home from a run and you were basically, you played it for like 5 hours straight, and I was chatting to you about it because I'd been telling you about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm in like world 5, and then you're like, I'm in world 13. I was like, what the fuck, Bally? What just happened? Because, you only just got this like today, and all of a sudden you've just like barged through it. Just absolutely.
I think it's really fascinating, like, indies were in a completely different space in 2013 versus now. Like, it was so different. And even Box Boy, I think, came out in like 2015. So there was something pleasant about the idea of listening to podcasts talking about smaller games. When I say small, I'm mainly talking about length of games. Normally they're kind of, let's say 5 to 15 hours. Although obviously you can't define indie games as one length, but I'm just being very broad stroke. And the idea that I could play a game like Box Boy that I just heard about this podcast on my run and they said it was so amazing. I was like, I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna play it, and then I'm gonna tell Nbz about it. And they're like, that joy, that gaming loop is just something that I've found more addictive the more we've done this podcast. Like, it's more fun to be a part of the conversation, hear about it on a podcast, go and play it, talk about it with Nbz. Like, that's a big, rinse and repeat rhythm with this show. And I think indies play into that so well, especially when you look back at 2015, where it was the dark days of the Wii U. Nintendo were putting out like 2 games a year. It was just a very different time, and it was a great time to actually play a lot of indie games, because the Wii U did get a good bunch of indie games. They weren't always day one on the system, but they did get a bunch that were really good. And then that just obviously escalated extremely during the Nintendo Switch era, and I've played an insane amount of indies since. So the idea that I played my first one in 2013 is just mind-boggling. And to be fair, I don't think you'd played a ton at that point either.
I played quite a few, I think, because of Steam, because I'd had a PC for a while.
How many is quite a few? That's what I'm trying. Like, it's not like a
like
ton.
15, 20 or so, I think. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely had more experience. But I mean, the phenomenon of the indie market didn't really start until around like 2008 anyway, so it was still a pretty fresh thing, right? Like Super Meat Boy on 360 and Castle Crashers. It was really 360 that was kind of the origin of that stuff. Braid. So yeah, it was still in its infancy, even when you were starting in like whatever it was, 2014. It was still relatively in its infancy. I would say like Hotline Miami being nominated for Game of the Year stuff. I remember IGN's Game of the Year had Hotline Miami in 2014. I was like, oh wow, it feels like things were changing at that point. Things were kind of turning around, and you were having more representation of these smaller games on these lists, right? Which I think before they were called downloadable games, like IGN had their downloadable game category, right? And that was the way that they were treated until they kind of eventually, I don't know, I feel like indies still get a bit of the short stick in some senses, but
but you only have to look at this year's TGA nominations to know that it's still a rough ride out there.
Absolutely. But I mean, the quality is higher than ever. I think some of the greatest games ever made come from that space, and some of my favorites of all time as well. So yeah, it's a big deal for sure. The other thing that I thought was funny is listening to the Trine discussion as well as the Box Boy discussion. They're both prefaced by, so I was out on a run and then I got home and I bought this game. That seemed to happen quite often, I think, in the early years of you would go out on a run, listen to a podcast, talk about something, come home and just buy the game, which I thought was fun.
Talking about this whole decade cycle with like this podcast, my relationship status and this kind of thing, like running is another one in there where 10 years ago, I was into running, but I wasn't really like whatever. I signed up to a marathon in 2013 and I ran my first marathon September 2013. Was it 13 or 14?
Okay, that's before the show then, if that's the case.
I'm just trying to remember.
Maybe it's 2014.
I think it was 2014. I ended up running the marathon, But yeah, I've done like 4 other marathons since, and like I've not run one since Bally Jr.'s arrived, but it is my intention to run more and get faster and stronger and all these things. But just another weird thing that's linked into the podcast. I feel that because podcasting, listening to podcasts, running, it's great synergy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got 2 more in Discord, and then shall I flip over to you, Nbz?
Sure, yeah.
So Atari Alex says, I would also add the episode where they explain the inside joke about the number from the school choir. Being a listener to this podcast from day one and having it teased early on and then finally getting the payoff all those years later was incredibly satisfying.
Guide me, O thou great Redeemer, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thine powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me till my want is all. Feed me till my want is all. Please all be seated. Welcome to the chapel of This Nintendo Life. I am your priest for today,
Lord Nbz himself.
Lord, literally Lord Nbz. And what you just heard, of course, is everyone's favourite hymn number 247. You all join us today for a very special episode, a very special moment for this podcast that has been building to for almost 10 years. Episode 247. Yep, 247. 247. The magic number. I actually went, for some reason, I came across episode 147 while I was listening. And in episode 147, we tease the story and we make a joke of like, lol, but that'll be 4 years' time. Surely people won't wait 4 years. And then we legit do that where we come back in 247 and that's when we actually tell the story. So yeah, we tease it in 147, being like, lol, that's 100 episodes away. And then we eventually do tell that story. Fun anecdote behind the creation of the start of that episode. So the start of that episode, if you remember, is me singing the hymn with a backing track that I found on YouTube. So here's the problem. When I sung it, I did it live for Bally, personal rendition, of course, as we recorded. And as I tried to match it to a YouTube thing, I realized that I was singing in the wrong key for what the YouTube one was. So I actually had to go back and re-record it to make sure that it fit with the actual tone of the YouTube thing. So the original audio that I did for Bally will never be heard unless I decide to put it up. Because I had to go and make sure that it actually sounded good. Otherwise, it really would be.
My God. Did I know this?
No, I don't think I told you. No.
Wow. Okay.
No.
Yeah. See, the magic of editing.
Yeah, it didn't magically work. I basically, after when I was editing, I just decided to sing it again and I sung it along with the YouTube backing track to make sure that it was in the right key, basically. Because otherwise it would have been off totally. And it would have sounded really bad if I just done it from the recording version. So yeah, that's a bit of behind the scenes of what happened there, which is fun.
Okay, this is the final message on Discord, and I think this is a suitable one to end. This is from Ace. It says, I forgot his name. I think it was Simon, but he would send in very interesting Game of the Year lists. Definitely one of my favorite parts of the show.
The next list comes in from Simon S. from the Netherlands, who, I don't know, last year we kind of noted he had some interesting taste, and we'll continue in that vein this year. So at number 10, he had Hyrule Warriors. Number 9, Wii Fit U. Number 8, Contra 3, The Alien Wars. Number 7, Metroid Fusion. Number 6, Metroid Zero Mission. Number 5, Code of Princess. Number 4, Sonic Generations. Number 3, Advance Wars Days of Ruin. Number 2, Never Alone. And number 1, Art Academy Atelier. So an eclectic list from Simon, never disappointing on this show.
It's people like Simon who write in that really make the show, I feel. Like, they're just so unpredictable. That number 1 just came out of nowhere.
Right?
Just, Simon, I don't even want to try and predict your top 10 for next year because that is a really unusual list. Our next list is from Simon S, who's from the Netherlands. He says, Dear guys at ThisNintendoLife, here are my top 5s for 2018. Top 5 games I played this year that didn't actually come out this year. Number 5, Devil's Third on the Wii U. Well, we'll have
That's
a chat
choice.
about this in a second.
That's a choice.
No, number 4, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest on the Super Nintendo. Number 3, Castlevania Mirror of Fate on the 3DS. Number 2, Fire Emblem Fates Conquest on 3DS.
Yes.
Number 1, Yoshi's New Island on 3DS.
Well, it's definitely, every year Simon sends us a list, and I'm like, I don't know if he's trolling us or if this is actually...
Or it's just personal taste, you know?
Personal taste, you know, that he loves Devil's Third and Yoshi's New Island, but yeah, a great list that always surprises me, and it is great.
So our next list is from Simon, who's from the Netherlands.
This is my favourite email of the year every year.
Simon is he always sends in his list, and it's always worth hearing. So let's go for this one. Dear guys at ThisNintendoLife, here's my top 10 list of video games for 2019. Number 10, Arcade Archives. Here we go, right? ER Kung Fu, a release of an 80s fighting game. At number 9, Ring Fit Adventure. It gets you moving, but it's no Wii Fit. Number 8, The Ninja Saviors, Return of the Warriors. Don't know what that is.
No.
Number 7, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, a very average Zelda game. Don't remember that part of the title.
No.
Number 6... Castlevania Collection. Number 5, The Tourist. Number 4, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. Number 3, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Lovely soundtrack. Number 2, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. And Nbz, number 1. It's got to be number 1. Team Sonic Racing. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Greetings, Simon S. from the Netherlands.
You never get a list like Simon's. It's just every year he just comes out here swinging with this list. I love it. It's the best list. Shout out to Simon. I don't know where Simon is. I feel like we haven't heard from him in a while.
We haven't.
Don't think he wrote in for like the last couple of Game of the Years. Wherever you are, Simon, we appreciate you. Thank you for your absolutely unhinged lists that were just baffling in every way. Like the decisions he would make, the games he would put on there as his favorites. Just like, it's the kind of stuff that, like, especially during that era, you're like, oh, these are terrible games Nintendo are putting out. And then every year, without fail, Simon would be like, Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, my number 6 game of the year. You know, like, it was brilliant.
To this day, I do not know if Simon was trolling or not.
No, I don't.
The emails were written so nonchalantly and seriously. There was nothing jokey about
he never really
winky face in any way.
He never really prefaced anything either. He would just be like, hey guys, here's my list for the year, and then would list out the list with no comments, just the game, and then that would be it. And we just left to be interpreting, like, is he being real, or is this a joke? Yeah. Like, when someone puts Devil's Third on their list, Bally, you do have to question their sanity, you know? So, I don't know.
It's nice to have someone send in a list that looks a bit different to all the other lists.
Absolutely.
That's what we salute you, Simon.
Yeah, it always gave me great joy. So if you're still out there, shout out, thank you for bringing some smiles to people's faces, because it was always a good time. Always look forward to those lists. Cool. So there's one other thing, Bally, that I have constantly talked about on this show, and it has been an entire decade of a lead up to a thing happening. Of course, every prediction, every single time, every moment that I could, my heart was saying, where the fuck is a new 2D Metroid game? And so I went back through the archive to try and find how many times I had predicted that there would be a new 2D Metroid. God. And so I believe I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 instances of me predicting a 2D Metroid. And the funniest part is the very first one. My prediction is like, what if they called it Dread? Yeah. I was like, that was back in that was episode 4 back in 2013. I was like, what if they just called it Dread? And you're like, oh yeah, well, they brought back that rumored name, which is incredible. So from the very beginning, wow. I knew it was coming. In my heart of hearts, I even said Dread back then. Anyway, I'm going to move on to my second prediction, which is a trumpet I've been blowing for probably 7-8 years.
Dread?
Dread. God, dude, imagine if it came out and was called Dread. How great would that be? It'd be
such a massive troll that I'd actually be annoyed with Nintendo, not happy. Because Dread was revealed or whatever, so long ago. It's just...
Yeah. So I predict in 2014 we will see the long-awaited return of the 2D Metroid.
Prediction number 2. You thought there would be a 2D Metroid in 2014.
Same prediction every year, Bally. I'll keep making it this year.
Keep making it.
So number 2 for me is, you've already heard it, it's going to be 2D Metroid.
Boom.
And you know, it's crazy out of nowhere. I know.
It's happening.
But I want to get a little bit more specific. I don't want to just say 2D Metroid and move on. I am going to say that we will get the reveal of a 2D Metroid at a Nintendo Direct. So not necessarily at E3.
On 3DS.
Yeah, on 3DS. I don't think it's going to be a Wii U game. I think it certainly fits 3DS much better. And to be honest, going into 2015, Nintendo need more 3DS games than Wii U if we're looking at the balance of how things are shaking up. So next up is my fourth prediction. And that prediction is the prediction. The one prediction to rule all predictions, Bally. That happens every time, and I keep saying it. And I'm never going to shut the fuck up. I think I know what
this is going to be.
I'm never going to shut the fuck up. New 2D Metroid will be announced for Nintendo Switch. Let's flesh it out a bit, though. I don't want to be just say that.
When's it coming? Who's making it? What's the deal?
I don't know who's making it. I'm not put that much thought, but I'll tell you, it's going to be a sequel to Metroid Fusion. We're finally going past the timeline. We're not doing any more of this.
We're finally making ground.
Exactly. It will be codenamed Metroid 5. It will be revealed at the Switch event, but will be very much teased. It will not be a full-blown thing. It will be a Metroid 5 codename.
Made by the makers of AM2R.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
What's your final serious prediction?
Yes. So... this is another one that is sobering in its seriousness that people will continue to not like because it's about a 3DS game. So, as we know, Nintendo don't want the 3DS to die, ever. It's constantly alive. And they, having seen the success of Samus Returns, made by Mercury Steam, have commissioned another game from them. Mercury Steam will be working on another 2D Metroid. It will still be on 3DS. And the reason it will still be on 3DS is it because it will be another remake, and it will be the remake of Metroid Fusion that they initially pitched. And I'm probably going to be disappointed by it because Metroid Fusion, as many people know, is my favourite game of all time. Well, Bally, it's a prediction from me about E3, which means the first thing on the docket that we've got to tick off. A new 2D Metroid will be announced. But it will once again not be a new Metroid game. As you recall, the end of Samus Returns, Mercury Steam did a very not subtle tease for Metroid Fusion by having one of the ex-parasites take control of one of those stupid monster guys and basically indicated, like, here's what we would do next if Nintendo let us. And I think that Nintendo have let them. I think, Samus Returns did well enough, and they found it was good working with Mercury Steam, and they're going to go ahead with it. It's going to be a Metroid Fusion remake, and they will reveal it. It will be on Switch, obviously. It will look a lot better than Samus Returns, but it will still maintain the 2.5D look. I will be annoyed about it again and say, this is bad. Why do you not use pixel art or use some distinctive art style instead of some generic 2.5D thing? Which will not matter when I play it, because I'll enjoy playing it because it's fucking Metroid Fusion. I will go first with my first prediction. At the top of the segment, I just have to say, this is not a prediction, but this is just the Nbz mantra of every year. A new 2D Metroid will be announced. It will happen. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know who's working on it. Actually, probably it's going to be... Let's be frank, it's going to be Mercury Steam. It's going to be...
Well, Mercury Steam, Samus Returns was...
2017,
like October time? September?
Yes, it was, yeah.
I think, it was September, because I remember playing it during the Loch Ness Marathon that year. And
okay.
The Loch Ness Marathon is always either at the end of September or start of October.
Cool. Well, I think it's happening. And if it's a remake of Fusion, fine. If it's a sequel... If it is Metroid 5, then hell yes. But it's going to be either of the two. However, Bally, of course, you know that I always have to have a 2D Metroid prediction, and so I'm going to go exactly against everything you just said. And I'm going to tell you that, yes, Mercury Steam are working on another 2D Metroid, and yes, it will come out this year, and it will be called Metroid Visions. Now, here's the kicker. The V is very important, Bally, because as we all know, when we all booted up Metroid Fusion back in the day, what did it say at the start of that game? It said Metroid 4. Now, no one ever talks about this. Metroid 4, that is canonically the number that it is in terms of the 2D series. We've not gone beyond it in the timeline, man. Every game since, the Prime series, all that stuff, timeline-wise, Other M, that is all pre-Fusion. Fusion is the furthest point we are at this point, which means that the V, of course, as everyone knows, Roman numeral for 5. Metroid 5 V Visions. Obviously, my first blanket announcement, the first time in the entirety of this show, a new 2D Metroid will not be announced. That's my blanket. That's my blanket statement. That's not one of my predictions. That's just that will happen. They're not going to announce the year after they do one. They're not going to announce a new one. I'm just saying it. So it happened, Bally. We manifested it on this show. And we finally got what we deserved, which is Metroid Dread. And I'm very pleased with it. I'm very happy that happened.
That is so wild.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think that's most of the stuff basically. I me being sick as a kind of theme carried through. The one thing that I noticed about the compilation of me being sick is there's a run from episode 129, 135, 140. Within those 10 episodes, 11 episodes, I'm sick 3 times in a row. And
was it summer?
No, it was the start of 2019, which is my last job that I absolutely hated, was awful. And I just was not in a good place, I think. I think that's the reason I was sick like 3 times, is like I was overly stressed and I wanted to leave and I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. And I think that's why 3 times in a row in 10 episodes I was sick. So I think I figured out what was going on. It's very interesting looking back because I just kept skipping through episodes. I'm like, wow, it's been a while since I have been sick. And then eventually I was like, oh wow, here and here and here. I was like, what the fuck was going on at this point in my life? And then I looked at the time and I was like, that makes a lot of sense in retrospect. So it's very interesting to see how that kind of stuff maps out from your real life.
But talking of your employment, I think it's fascinating that like, you know, you're at uni at the start of the show, and now you have an awesome job in video games.
Yes.
Basically playing Fantasy Critic for real.
Oh god, it's so dangerous,
like
but yes.
The dream job, right? And I think it's just crazy how far you've come, like, since that first episode. Like, I think it's really great that, like, you know, just we are both so different since 10 years ago.
Sure.
And I think it's really cool that, like, you've got that job and it's going well.
Yeah.
And,
this year has been some of the most insane shit of all time. And the problem is I can't talk about any of it. But, like, I've told Bally about it, and Bally's like, what the fuck? What is going on? Like, it just keeps getting more and more surreal every single day. And, like, by the end of this year, I'm going to be like, how did that happen? Like, all this stuff happened. And, yeah.
Okay, I'm putting a mark in the sand here. Right, so.
Okay.
We're talking about 10 years of podcasting.
Yes.
Can these secrets come out if we do an episode talking about 20 years of podcasting?
I think probably, yes.
I agree. Probably. I think probably.
Yeah,
so
by that point we can talk about it.
It's not a full-on promise.
No.
But if you guys hang around for another 10 years...
if we hang around for another 10 years,
if we're around another 10 years, someone shout out, we need Nbz secrets. There we go.
Yeah. There's some crazy shit. It's just... absolutely unhinged, but yes, it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot, and it's I didn't expect this outcome, but hey, I'm glad it's happened. So there we are. It's been 10 years, man. It's been a long time. Thanks for doing the show for 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. Any final thoughts? Anything?
I think it's nice how when the show started, it was a lot, you know, like, regardless of whatever else I had in my life, playing games, finding the time to talk about them consistently without breaks was an intimidating prospect. But now, and it's been the case for years and years and years, it's just part of life now. It's just part of life to play different games, to think about them analytically, to note down a few things ahead of recording schedules, and then to come on and talk about those games and hang out with you. And it's just, it has been a part of my life, and I think it's just the most rewarding, fulfilling, one of the things I'm the most proud of in my life, for sure. And it's really great, and I'd love for it to continue.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And we'll keep doing it as long as you people are still hanging around listening. Because again, I mean, the reason to do this again is obviously hanging out with Bally, talking about video games. That's the most important thing. But really, if people didn't listen, it'd be a lot harder, I think, to do this, you know?
It would be harder. And, you know, people writing in, knowing that people appreciate the show, and shout out to all the patrons and everyone else who listens. It's awesome, like, just putting it together and having, like, a community to, you know, talk about these things. And it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people, again, writing in with specific memories of things that they enjoyed is, I think, it's testament to how long people have been listening, but also that, hey, we did something. We made a show that people enjoyed. So that's always a good thing. And I know that I've kind of had this experience already, right? Because I had a lot of YouTube years of, you know, being known on the internet and people watching stuff that I made and things like that. But this really is like the first time you've ever done. I mean, technically no, because you had like a little YouTube channel back in the day, Bally. But yeah, this is really the first kind of like thing that you've done in this kind of creative endeavor way. So yeah, it's been good, I think.
It's fun just to see like, and you can hear from like the recordings from old episodes. I think I do sound quite different. And
Bally, you have improved immensely, like immensely. Like again, like having listened to all these clips again and going through all the stuff, just the way that you articulate yourself, the way that you're able to, structure thoughts and have discussions and jumping off points and all that sort of stuff.
I've evolved from being just a little Nintendo fanboy, like I'm now
exactly.
an evolved Nintendo fanboy. Like I think just playing more games, every single game you play, you're learning something new. And once you're at this stage, 10 years in of playing game upon game upon game, multiple genres, multiple platforms, all over the place, I think we've both just learned so much about the industry and games generally, and like what we like, tastes, how our tastes change in those times, as we've described with our top 50 list. Like I think it's really interesting and a valuable thing to do. Like it's really good fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's going to close us for this episode. So let's get on out of here and plug some stuff as per usual. We have a way that you can support us, and people have been supporting us not for the full 10 years but for a good amount of chunk of time on patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. Go there to get bonus episodes, fun stuff, extra things, and we would like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to all of our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan, and Turtle. I also want to shout out a brand new patron. They are Orange Thunder. Thank you for your support, but thank you to all of our other patrons. We really, really appreciate the support that you've given the show, and I think we've had Patreon for 5 years now, maybe half the show's time. So for everyone who's donated money to us over all that time and listened to all the bonus shows, it's been awesome, and we want to keep going with it.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for all of that. You can obviously find the show in various places. You can find me on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, wherever you want to go, at Lord Nbz. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And I need to set up some other accounts, I think.
Yeah, I think everyone's slowly moving away from the little blue bird that could. So you can find the show at TNL Podcast if you want updates about the show. Gives links to our YouTube channel, our Discord channel as well. So lots of places you can keep in contact and up to date with what we're doing. Usually we have emails where people write in. So Bally, where can they send those to?
Yes, please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That's thisnintendolife@gmail.com. And we also have an emails channel on our Discord server, so you can leave your comments, your questions over there.
You know something I'm proud of is that in 10 years, never have I had to write a fake email just to give us an email for the week. People have always written in. We may have got close to the bottom of the barrel, as we always say every single show, but we always have an email or two at least from people to read out, which I super appreciate. So thank you to everybody who has emailed in over the years, and all the people who consistently do it, even if people have only done it once or have done it, the first time recently. It's a huge part of the show, and we love hearing those. So do continue to send those in, because we managed to keep the streak going.
And it was harder early on because we always had an email segment almost no matter what, and now we rotate it in and out a little bit more. But like we consistently covered all your guys' emails. It's good.
Absolutely. And you can find the show in various places. We're on Spotify, we are on Stitcher. You can download us on any podcasting app that exists in the universe. Just search for This Nintendo Life, find us, download us, give us ratings, all that good stuff. If you want to thank us for 10 years of podcasting, go give us a review either on Spotify or on iTunes. Both are very much appreciated, and we'd love to get a bit more of that stuff out there.
I think that's one thing that shows our age, is you call it iTunes and not Apple Podcasts.
I know, god damn it, fucking every time, man. I just some things I'm just not going to change my tricks for. I try, but anyway, iTunes is still. I don't know, does anyone fucking use iTunes anymore? I don't think so. Does anyone even listen to music anymore? I think so. It's just on YouTube now, or on
Spotify.
any other Spotify. Yeah, Spotify's the main place.
Apple Music.
Apple Music. Spotify is a much larger percentage of our listenership these days, and I think that says a lot about where people are in terms of where they listen to stuff. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with my podcast app forever because that's just me. I'm a dinosaur. Just like Skype, I'm just going to stick to my good old Pocket Casts, even as it gets worse and worse. It's still the best thing that I have, at least, and it tells me how many hours of my life I've wasted listening to podcasts, which is too many to admit.
Oh God, I hate that. No, it's coming again.
It's coming again, Bally. Okay.
You know what else is coming up in December?
Yeah.
Game of the Year podcast.
That is true. Sorry, before you go into Game of the Year podcast, I would like a bet from you right now. Who will have the higher podcast listening stats at the end of the year? Will it be me or will it be you?
I'm quietly confident on this one.
Okay.
I don't know how you're feeling. I know you've had quite a busy year work-wise.
Yes.
And, you know, see, I don't work on Thursdays. I look after Bally Jr.
Right.
And these days are actually quite good for podcasts. And my podcasts keep going up without me. I'm going to claim it. I'm going to take the win.
I also think you're going to be the winner this year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The tables have turned.
I think part of that is there was an entire week I was in Germany and didn't listen to anything, which is unheard of. Like, that's impossible.
That'll be the difference, though.
It will.
People will think that's a small difference, but that'll be
like massive difference.
100 hours.
Exactly. It is at least 100 hours. Yeah. It's a huge difference. So yeah.
Also, I'm cheating because I listen on higher speeds more often than you, but
I generally do 1.5 on my app.
See, I'm 1.7 consistently.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to bed, but
saving more time, listening to more. King of the hill. Well, we'll look for. We'll reveal it at the end of the year. Our podcasting stats. Maybe not the numbers because they're too terrifying. But who has
I've
won,
admitted those numbers to so few people, and every single time I admit it, they just look at me like I'm
you're insane.
Insane. Yeah. So maybe that's another thing we can reveal in our 20-year anniversary.
God,
we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Bally. Game of the year. Yeah.
Right, so for those who don't know, we've got a 3-pillar format. So our first Game of the Year special will come out on the 4th of December, on the Monday, and that will be GOTY GOTY. So as we mentioned earlier, did I miss another T?
You keep missing the T out every time.
GOTY GOTY.
There we go.
So it's Game of the Year that didn't actually come out that year. So we've both been playing a bunch of games that didn't come out this year, and we will be doing top 10 lists ranked each to say our top 10 games of the year that didn't actually come out in the year 2023. As I mentioned before, my list might be a little shorter than 10 games, but we'll see what I can do.
Yeah, it's fine. If that's the case, then we'll do a kind of bouncing back and forth thing, and it'll be good.
In the middle of December, on the 11th, Monday the 11th of December, will be our Patreon show, ThisNintendoLife. And for that episode, we will be doing our top 5 joint ranked Nintendo games of the year. So we've been playing a bunch of Nintendo games this year that we haven't talked about on this show, but we've talked about on our ThisNintendoLife show. That's our Patreon show that you can listen to for $1. That episode will come out on Monday, the 11th of December. Mm-hmm. And then the big one, on the 18th of December, it will be the third pillar, our Game of the Year episode. So this will be a joint list of 10 games, probably 10 games, we'll discuss that. Mm-hmm. These are games that came out on Nintendo systems in the year of 2023. We will be ranking them, we will be arguing, we will be discussing, we will be reaching consensus on what will be the top 10 Nintendo games of 2023. And like I said, that comes out on Monday the 18th of December.
So just to caveat that as well, that probably won't actually come out on Monday the 18th because of various travel things that are happening.
Yes.
So I don't know when exactly it will happen, but it will happen around the Christmas period at some point. It may be the case that we have to put up the Patreon show on Monday the 18th for everybody to listen to, and then hold the other one until later.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're both doing some traveling throughout December, so the timing on that one's going to be a little up in the air. It might come out on a Thursday or Wednesday, whenever, but we have a little bit of overlap in terms of when we can make that happen. So we'll see if that happens, and we'll communicate that as well. Maybe next time we'll have a bit more of a solid idea, but the plan is to do 3 shows, but the third one, timing will be kind of dependent on what's going on. So,
and then I think as usual, we're going to be doing personal top 10 cross-platform lists.
Yes.
And they'll also have video versions. I don't know when my edit of that will be done, but it will come out probably sometime between now and the new year.
I usually like to shoot for mine on Christmas Day and Bally's on New Year's
Day,
Eve.
Yeah. New Year's Eve Day.
Yes, whichever one works out. But yeah, that'll probably happen as well.
You can expect 5 different podcasts, including our Nintendo show. But
absolutely. Cool. I think that's it. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Nbz, there's 40 more minutes left of this episode.
You're right. If you look at your podcasting app, there's still like a lot to go. What could that mean? Well, I guess you're going to have to listen to the outro and find out. So thank you again, everybody. I mean, shout outs to anyone who's been here from the beginning, listening back since that very kind of... I don't know, bad audio days, those kind of like early outings of ours. Hugely appreciated. I know there's a lot of people who've been around for that length of time, so it's
even come from Nbz's Pokemon days. Thank you to all those people who've just been here from like the year. What was the year? 2000.
Look, World's Boss, who wrote in for this thing, World's Boss commented on, I think, my 5th battle of all time on my YouTube channel. So literally since the very beginning, that man has been around.
That's 2008.
8.
There we go.
So, appreciate everybody who has been around that long. It's a ridiculous amount of time. So, that's going to be us. We'll maybe keep listening after the music happens, and you'll hear some stuff. Let's say.
And here's to another 10 years.
Here's to another 10 years. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye. The musical interlude used on today's show was DK Mountain and Dino Dino Jungle from Mario Kart Double Dash, copyright Nintendo 2003. Okay, so, for everyone still here, still listening, I have a special treat for you. So, when we first started the podcast back in 2013, I wanted to have Bally kind of be slowly eased into it, because obviously I'd been doing Pokemon stuff for years and years, and it was very easy for me to just talk on a microphone off the top of my head, all that sort of stuff. And we thought, hey, what about we practice this? How about we just sit down and we'll just do a practice episode of the podcast, so that we're not just like throwing Bally into the front lines of the internet, having never done this before, give him a bit of chance to hone his skills, know what he sounds like on a microphone, all that sort of stuff. So we recorded that practice episode. I edited that practice episode and I sent it to Bally for his approval to be like, oh, how do you feel about this, all that sort of stuff. And for a long time, I thought I had lost this because it was on a hard drive that was on my old PC that didn't die, but the hard drive got moved, and then I thought that I had the audio of it on another hard drive that I backed up, but that hard drive had died. Miraculously, I managed to find it. It's a piece of audio. So, the next 40 minutes or so is the pilot episode. Up to this point, unreleased. No one else has heard it. Myself and Bally, the only people. So I thought it would be a very nice kind of full circle moment here, the 10-year anniversary of the show, to let you all listen to our pilot test recording for the podcast. So, without further ado, here is that show. Enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome to Now You're Playing with Power, a Nintendo podcast. This is episode 1. I am your host, Nbz, and joining me today, my co-host who shall be with me forevermore for the duration, length of this show and ever onwards, Mr. Bally.
Hi, yes, Bally here. Excited to be here. New project.
Very, very excited because I want to talk about Nintendo, man, and I don't get to do that often. So this is going to be a good treat, and we're going to enjoy it. So we're going to break this show down into a few segments, beginning with what we've been playing. I guess or you could go first. We'll decide that. We'll see.
So do you want to go first?
Sure, I'm ready for that. So yeah, we'll do that, and then we'll move on to you, and then we're going to discuss some of the upcoming holiday titles for Nintendo systems, mainly focusing on Nintendo. Super Mario 3D World and
A Link Between Worlds.
Yes, indeed. So I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to talk about a game that is on Nintendo systems, but I'm actually not playing it on one. That is, of course, Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, which I am playing on PlayStation Vita. Now, this game is actually available on 3DS as well, although the UK version on the 3DS hasn't been available until, of course, today, the 8th of November, which is kind of weird. That version was delayed in Europe. But it was available in America. So to a degree, that's why I decided to get the Vita version, because it was available earlier. But I've been playing through that quite a lot, and I'm almost finished with it. It's essentially a Metroidvania-style game where you're playing as Batman, and the story essentially follows on from the Batman Arkham Origins game on consoles, although I haven't played that and I have no idea what the story is. And honestly, I don't really care what the story is, because I'm very gameplay-focused when it comes to these kind of things, especially a Metroid-style game. And so, the basic premise is that you're Batman, you're going through a facility and taking out bad guys, looking for upgrades, and essentially going through that progression. Now, Bally, I know you don't really have too much, let's say...
non-Nintendo experience?
Well, you don't. Yes, that as well. But you don't really have that much experience with the Metroid franchise.
I haven't, and I feel very guilty about this. It will change, I promise.
Yeah. So the main kind of aspect of these games that I really enjoy is the upgrading process and the backtracking. I'm not sure what your opinions on backtracking in games are. What do you think of it?
It depends on the game, really. My personal experience of backtracking has been maybe something like Zelda, the 3D Zeldas. I found that backtracking is often necessary. I wouldn't say that it's a downside. Would you say it's a downside in Batman?
No, although I do feel that there is quite a bit of an issue with the map system. So the map system works very similar to a Metroid game, where it's broken up into squares. You saw my Metroid Fusion LP,
yeah.
And so the map there is very similar. It's broken up into these squares, so you should know exactly where you are. But with the game's design, it's very much built in a way that a 3D game is, but...
Does it highlight the squares you've been in and not been in?
I don't think it does, actually.
Really? I'd feel that's a big one for me.
Yeah. I definitely think that is somewhat of an issue. The bigger issue at hand is the fact that because it is a 2D game, but they put so much 3D into it, you bend around corridors and you kind of go through pipes and stuff, and then you're on higher levels and lower levels, but the map can't really designate between those because it...
A bit like that other Metroid game you played.
Which Metroid game I played?
What's the one that's halfway between 2D, 3D?
Other M.
Other M, yeah. Anything like that in terms of what you were saying about pipes?
Not quite, because Other M is a fully 3D game.
With 2D aspect, yeah.
You can move in a number of directions, whereas in Batman it is literally left or right. Even though they give you the illusion that you're in a 3D world, you can essentially only go left or right. And the problem with that is they keep changing the environments, and the map doesn't kind of show that because the map is so flat and it looks like it's 2D. So it's very difficult to see. So when you go from an upstairs place to a downstairs place, on the map, it's really hard to distinguish how you get from one place to another because it's flat and because it doesn't really give you a good visual indication of where you need to go to get to this other place. So I have been finding myself getting stuck in certain areas thinking, how do I get to that place? Because it's not really easy for me to interpret just by looking at the map. I kind of have to do my own work, kind of constantly popping up the map menu, which is, I think, is the disadvantage of the Vita, is the fact that you don't have the second screen to dedicate to the map. And I feel like playing this on 3DS would definitely help because you have that bottom screen.
Do you think Metroid Prime map?
Yes.
That incredible 3D web.
Yes.
Do you think they could have put something like that?
I definitely think that would have been much better. And the interesting thing is that the guys behind this game are Armature Studio, and they basically are ex-Retro developers from Retro Studios who made the original Metroid Prime. And so they have a lot of people on that dev team who, were on that game and obviously had the experience of making that map system. And it's kind of weird that they wouldn't put it into this game, because it seems like that would function a lot better. Which is, it's curious, but I guess that's what they wanted to go for. So,
is that your only complaint?
I wouldn't say it's my only complaint. There are some kind of some bad problems it has with checkpointing. There was a point that I just played where you have to essentially go through these different areas using all your gadgets to get around. And there's a bit of puzzle solving, and there's a bit of time-based puzzles, and a little bit of combat. And they expect you to kind of go through this entire area to get to the other side to essentially open a lock to get a gate lifted. And it's a relatively long process. Like, it takes around 5-6 minutes. And the problem is there's an area there where you can basically fall and instantly die, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you don't have quick enough reactions and you don't get your zip line off quick enough, you'll fall into the electricity and die. And that section is about 4 minutes in to the thing, but there's no checkpointing in between, so you have to reload the save and go all the way back and go through it again. So I feel like that's kind of a bit of a time waster, and a little bit frustrating. So it kind of, it does impact it somewhat. But as far as complaints go in terms of gameplay, I don't really have a huge amount. I'm really enjoying it because that's the kind of thing I do like, those kind of, exploring and finding these different gadgets and using them in different ways, because a lot of the time you'll go back to previous areas and you'll be able to go and grab like a power-up. So I guess similar to Metroid, there's like health upgrades where you can go and when you get 4 pieces of them, I guess it's similar to Zelda as well, how hearts work. You find 4 pieces and it'll upgrade your health a certain extent. So you go back when you have the right gadgets, you find they're very clearly marked on the map. Question marks are secrets, and you can find those pretty easily. So that's pretty cool. And so I guess those are the main complaints I had with it. I guess, like, what kind of would you prefer to jump into something like this, or to jump into a traditional Metroid, or even like a Castlevania? Because those are the kind of games that this is building from.
I feel I definitely want to play Metroid first. I think it was arguably the first, and therefore, you should play that one first. But I'd love to, like, I'm a bit of a superhero fan, so I'd love to try Batman at some point.
Right.
Maybe in the future pick up the 3DS version for sure. Considering you're saying so much good stuff about the Vita version, and you say that they're not very different.
No, the main difference is obviously visual fidelity, and the game is going to run a lot better on Vita because it's more powerful hardware. They can do high quality textures, and the game will not have lag. There's no slowdown because of number of enemies or whatever. Whereas I feel like 3DS will probably suffer from that, and suffer a little bit more as a result of the 3D. We have seen lately, especially with Pokemon, that 3D can be a real issue if it's not worked into the development process, because it basically chugs the frame rate down to a horrible amount, and it just looks like when you're playing a Pokemon battle that they're moving at hardly any frames per second. It's really kind of off-putting. So maybe that would be an issue with the 3DS version. But
and so, what's the fighting like in general? Because I know that the 3D Batman series, like, what's considered often is the best bit is the fighting, and the fighting mechanisms for a 3D fighter. Like, how did they turn that 2D?
They've translated it pretty well. The free-flow combat system from Arkham Asylum and City is essentially replicated in this game, but of course you're not in a 3D environment. You have to go left and right. So a lot of the time, if enemies are there, because you remember like the enemies in Skyward Sword, which have like the electric swords or whatever they are. So basically, like if an enemy has like an electric baton in Batman, and you try and just punch them, you'll get electrocuted instantly. So what you have
there's a lot of timing involved. involved.
Yeah, it's a lot of timing. There's lots of countering. Enemies will indicate when they're going to attack you from behind, so you press triangle to counter them. But some enemies are uncounterable, like those electric baton guys. So either you have to use your cape to stun them and then go and beat them up a bit, or jump over them and hit them from behind. So there's a lot of tactics involved, and especially when they're throwing multiple enemies at you in a kind of short space of time, you have to very quickly think, like, who should I target first? What's my main priority and who I'm going to take down, and that kind of thing. And that's basically how the combat system works. But overall, I'm really enjoying it. I think it's definitely a fantastic game. The critics haven't been too kind to it. I'm not especially sure why, but maybe they feel like it's a bit of a stripped down version of the console games. I feel it's very distinct from those because it's much more Metroidy as opposed to kind of combat-y and an open world like Arkham Origins on console is. But that game hasn't really been receiving too much praise either. So I guess that's going to be it for this segment. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll be back in a second with Bally's impressions of what he's been playing. So we'll see you then. Alright everyone, welcome back to Now You're Playing with Power, and we're going to move on to Bally's now, what you've been playing, whatever the fuck we're calling it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll work on that name. Something will come. So
everything's a work in progress right now. So
yeah, absolutely. So I've been playing Luigi's Mansion 2.
Or Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, I believe. Is that the name? Because there was some weird naming conventions that went on. It was like 2 in Europe and like Dark Moon in the US. I can't quite remember.
Oh, shall we say Dark Moon then? Yeah,
well, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, honestly.
Everyone knows the game we're talking about anyway. So I picked it up when it came out earlier this year. Was quite slow to progress through it. Been playing a bit recently. I'm on the 4th mansion, as it were. I've just been doing the last couple of ice mansion missions, as it were, I guess. Yeah. And yeah, like I think this is absolutely solid game. Probably like the most. I was going to say the most polished game I own on 3DS, but it's not compared to something like 3D Land. But for what it does, and from what I've played of the first Luigi's Mansion, it does something very different and new, and I definitely like that.
You know, coming to the point of being polished, I think that you can certainly say it is one of the most polished games on 3DS. There are a lot of little things and touches in the environment, like that you can mess around with your vacuum, like cloths that will kind of blow when you blow at them and stuff like that, and pots that will move around. I think I know that neat attention to detail is really unique and interesting, and definitely kind of shows off the power of the 3DS in a very different way to how other games do.
Yeah, the cutscenes and graphically, just the 3D, because you're permanently moving between these sort of boxy rooms, and I feel the whole point of the 3D the 3DS when it first came out was that when the 3D was in action, it was like you were looking into a box, and it's that the way it just succeeds with that, what it's trying to do there, where you're looking into this box and you can see Luigi close to you, you can see, say, a window even closer to you, and you can see a window at the back and even stuff going on beyond the window at the back, and just all those layers are very clear, and it just looks really crisp. So yeah, no, definitely it is definitely well polished, but yeah, no, I actually like the way the missions are laid out, and I know there's been a lot of criticism that they should have just made it so it was like the first one and it was seamless, as it were. But I kind of I don't generally sit down and play my 3DS for hours on end, so I really honestly do like the ability to pick up play a half-hour mission. Oh, do a half-hour mission, have a break, maybe do another one later, that kind of thing. I mean, what do you think about the missions?
I do like them. I'm not someone who played the first Luigi's Mansion, so I don't really have a point of reference, though I've watched like LPs and stuff of it, so I have an idea of how the first one operated. You didn't get too far into the first one, did you?
No, not at all. I've watched more LPs, definitely, like you.
Yeah. So I actually definitely think that it lends itself more to the portable, because you will be doing much more bite-sized playing as opposed to, sitting down for 5 hours and just chugging through it. Although I'm sure a lot of people do that anyway, because people exist like that. But I do feel that there is a little bit of criticism to be leveled at the length of the missions, especially some of the later ones, where it's moving more from like a 20-minute thing into like a 40 to 45-minute thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the second last, spoilers, the second last mission on the Ice Mansion, it must have taken me, I mean, I was exploring quite a bit, but it took me about 35 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah.
And most of them were taking me 25 minutes, even like 20 minutes, some of them. So I definitely, and I'm obviously on the last mansion now, not done it yet, but from what you've described, it obviously gets a bit longer. So
yeah, and those puzzles get more intricate, and there's much more to be made of them. I think it's also interesting to bring up the point of checkpointing, seeing as I mentioned it with Batman, because there are no mid-mission checkpoints in this game, which I think would have been really appreciated when you are thinking maybe someone who's playing this on the bus and only has 15 minutes, they're not going to get through a whole mission, and then what are they supposed to do? Leave their 3DS? I guess a lot of people do that and kind of put it in sleep mode, but then you lose access to accessing Street Pass, and you can't open that without closing the game down, which is rather unfortunate. And
does Street Pass not work when?
No, well, it does work, but the problem is that if you want to access those Street Passes, you have to close down the game application because it can't run two applications at once.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's a little bit annoying, I guess, for people who are going to be playing it in that way. But otherwise, yeah, the mission structure is good, and I feel like it was a definite improvement over Luigi's Mansion, the original.
Now maybe I was a bit young and impressionable when the GameCube version was out, but I genuinely found it quite kind of creepy, and it made me jump quite a bit. I mean, I'll admit I was a bit of a timid young 11-year-old, but
both of us were.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But would you say that this version is scary enough? Because at times little things have made me jump here and there, but nothing. It's never been like oh crap, I can't believe I'm about to go in this room. Oh my god, something's going to happen. And I don't know, it felt like maybe they could have done more to creep you out a bit.
Yeah.
Is that asking too much of Nintendo, do you think?
I don't think so. I think that what they did with the atmosphere in this game is pretty fantastic overall. The sound design is so great.
Yeah, you have to play it with headphones.
Definitely. Because what they build into the sound design is all those little kind of movements in drawers and closets and stuff that make you aware that there are ghosts in the room and help you actually to find ghosts and where they're hiding, which is really interesting. Because when I started, I was playing with headphones on, cranking up the volume, and the music's all really atmospheric and all these kind of noises, and there's silence, and then there's kind of a faint noise in the background that you can hear. And I think that the way that they portrayed Luigi and made Luigi much more of a character in this game, far more than any kind of Nintendo character has ever been before. He's filled with emotion. You can feel his fear, and I think that they really did well, animating him and everything.
No, really well. I agree entirely. I mean, it's that kind of when he leans into fireplaces or something and he's like, oh, what's going on here? And then the whole thing just flips around and he's absolutely crapping his pants on the other side. And then, so that's how you get through, say, a secret door in the wall, and you can see it on your map, so you know it's there, but you don't know. I don't know. It works well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really well.
Yeah. But in terms of it being scary, I definitely got kind of jump scares when I was first playing it a little bit. That moment when you're going up the stairs, this isn't really a spoiler, it's a very early game. You're going up the stairs and the stairs just crumble. They just disappear and you slide down and the room goes dark and you start getting chased around. But later on, when I wasn't really using headphones as much, and there were just loads of ghosts, and I was expecting ghosts all the time anyway, it wasn't really doing too much to me. It's very whimsical in the way that it operates. It's obviously trying to pull off the atmosphere of a scary game, but it's not going to try and scare you, honestly. And unless you're like super little and impressionable in that way, then I don't think it does that job, honestly.
And one more criticism I have. I don't know, this is just maybe a small thing, and I'm not at the end of the game yet, so maybe there's more to come. But they could have just had a few more variables in terms of the ghosts. Like, for example, the last mission I did, more spoilers, they were basically super powerful, almost invincible versions of the basic red, green, and yellow ghosts. And they acted in the same way that those three ghosts do, and they could have just maybe had a few more ghosts and mixed it up a bit, or what's to stop them doing a new ghost every level? Maybe is that asking too much? But
well, I'm not really sure. I mean, I really do understand that criticism. That it's it makes a lot of sense, because essentially what they're doing is they're taking the kind of behavior pattern they've already built and just giving them more HP is what it essentially is. They're just souping up those ghosts. And there are little changes where they'll have a bucket on their head, which you have to suck off, and then you have to suck them up after that.
Oh, those are so annoying.
Which, yeah, those guys suck, and they're really hard to take down. And then especially the worst ones, the ones that throw banana peels out. I hate those guys so much. Oh my lord!
Those yellow ones?
Yeah, or the blue ones. I can't remember. Been a while since I've played it, but yeah, no, I understand that criticism. It's something which Nintendo, I guess, have a problem with overall, and a lot of gaming companies do this, where they have enemies and they'll have their stock number of enemies, and then as levels progress and as you get further into the game, they'll basically take those enemies and just kind of palette swap them, as it were. I was talking about the guys with the electric swords in Skyward Sword earlier, and those guys are essentially just moblins with different color and a little bit of a change to them. It's obviously much more significant in that game just because of how combat works, but it's definitely a problem that I feel is throughout a lot of games, and not just exclusive to this one. Alright, well, that's going to do it for this segment. A good discussion of Luigi's Mansion, and I'm sure we'll come back to it at some point. But we are going to take a quick break, and we will be back with a discussion of the holiday games, so don't go anywhere. See you in a second. Okay, welcome back everyone to Now You're Playing with Power. We are going to talk about some of the holiday games coming up. Of course, the main ones being Super Mario 3D World on Wii U and Link Between Worlds, Legend of Zelda, Link Between Worlds.
All the worlds.
All the worlds. High rule, low rule, left rule, right rule. Every rule that you can think of. And what we think about them. So, first question, I guess, Bally, which one are you more excited for? Which one are you gonna dive into first? I know they actually come out like a week apart. In America, they come out on the same day. It's the same day as Xbox One comes out. That day has Link Between Worlds, Mario 3D World, Xbox One, and Tearaway, which is a Vita game that I'm interested in. But that's a fucking packed day, man. It's pretty deadly.
Which one am I more interested in? Based on the trailers, based on what's new, what's not new, it's got to be Link Between Worlds, I'd say. I mean, I probably enjoyed Zelda games in the past more than Mario overall. And for that simple reason, I'm definitely more pumped about the new Zelda. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think also you've been playing Mario 3D Land quite recently.
I have. And it didn't come out that long ago either, right?
No, well, I mean, 3D Land came out end of 2011, so it's about 2 years now. But it's the same. It's this is funny because this is the exact opposite of the November of 2011, where Skyward Sword and Super Mario 3D Land came out on the same day. We're basically instead of getting a console Zelda and a portable Mario, we're getting a console Mario and a portable Zelda. Which it's funny how that works out and how the teams kind of combine in that way. To bring us these results, but as well.
So, which are you more excited about?
Zelda's coming first, so that one's a little bit further ahead of my mind because I'm obviously going to be playing it before Mario.
Yeah.
But there is something about 3D Mario games that just hooks me, that just like gets its claws in me, literally in this game because there's fucking cats.
Claws in you.
I blitzed through 3D Land. I annihilated that game. Like, I think my 3DS total hours played is around 20, which isn't super high considering the other games that I have played on there and the hours that I put into them. But that was a very short period of time I played that through, and I basically did everything there was to do in the game. I played through the entire thing as both Mario and Luigi, every single level, got to the top of every flagpole, got every single comet medal or star coin, I can't remember what they were in that game, I think star coin, that was available to me, and loved every second of it. I think that the way that they took Mario and put him into that setting, and the way they played with perspective and made the 3D of the 3DS an actual viable gameplay feature was...
It's one of the first games to do it as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. It was the main one which said, there is a reason to have this as a feature, and it's not just a gimmick, and this actually aids gameplay in a significant way. And that's something that I feel is a little bit on the edge of my mind when thinking about 3D World, because of course on Wii U there's no stereoscopic 3D, there's no ability to judge distance as well as you could in 3D Land, just because of the nature of the game not being on a system that supports it. And so there is that kind of stumbling block, I feel, but from what I've been hearing, they kind of get around that in interesting ways. Like, I heard that they've been playing with shadows, using those and using lighting to change perspectives and to help you navigate levels and navigate those hard areas. You remember in 3D Land, those kind of box levels that you'd go into where you'd have to turn on the 3D and play with the perspective?
Yeah, no, they were great.
Yeah.
Not enough of them, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I think that they could have put a few more of those in, but they do rely heavily on 3D, so people who can't use 3D or don't want to use it kind of a bit left out there. Which is the unfortunate thing about 3DS, I feel, is that they can't have a mandate where they have to use 3D as a gameplay feature just because of the nature, especially with 2DS out now as well. So that's a bit of a problem.
I'll tell you one thing about 3D World was from E3, I was sort of, what that looks... Well, I think everyone had the instant shock of, wow, they're going backwards from Galaxy, you know? So there was that edge of, kind of, why is everyone going backwards?
Yeah.
But then, and I saw the gameplay, and it did grow on me. The cat outfit's cool, I guess.
I'm not a guy who's into cats, but look... Don't get me wrong, I'm not a guy who goes on YouTube looking up cat videos, let's get that out of the way. But what I am really interested in is the fact that the cat suit has multiple levels upon which it can operate, and that is something that I loved about the Beetle in Skyward Sword, how that item could be used in so many varied ways. You could use it to collect stuff, you could use it to cut ropes, you could use it to scout an area to find out if there are enemies.
Do you think they're comparable?
I think they are comparable just because of the multiple ways in which they can be used, because the Beetle has so many functions, the cat suit also does. You can climb up vertical walls, you can do this thing where you do a dash jump, there's extra speed involved, and there's loads of other kind of neat things with that suit that make it kind of multifunctional in a way that a lot of Mario power-ups are not.
But I was going to say that the big thing that sold me about 3D World was the incredible jump in stuff that was shown between the trailer from a few months ago and E3.
Yes.
The trailer a few months ago, do you remember this trailer? It was in a direct. It was maybe 2 months ago.
Was it the E3 one or the...
No, it wasn't it wasn't the E3 one. It was
Oh, you're talking about the new trailer.
the new trailer. Yeah, how long ago was that?
That maybe a month ago at this point.
Yeah, that just blew my mind compared to E3. The amount of stuff that they just packed in there and it honestly did look quite a bit more like Galaxy.
Yeah, and you really kind of get the feel like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the Tokyo
and they
team.
were like, and there's this world, and there's this other world, and they just showed just snapshots of just loads of different stuff going on, and it was much more impressive than E3, I think.
It was crazy town, and that is what you want out of EAD Tokyo, because you know that they do crazy fucking well. And from their pedigree so far, this looks like not only an evolution of 3D Land, but like a revolution of 3D Land. Like, they are going bananas with this shit. They are absolutely off the walls, every idea they can throw. And it seems really strange that Nintendo would show such a bland, such a kind of unexciting trailer at E3, where, you know, E3 has so many people, there's so many eyes on E3 and so many people are watching it.
It looked like Mario Party.
Well, you know, I feel like it looked like New Super Mario Brothers, like that feel, especially the way they were pushing multiplayer. It did seem like, you know, this isn't super exciting. And yet, you know, the Nintendo Direct, they put out this trailer and suddenly everyone's like, holy shit, I'm excited for this game now. Like, this looks good. Which is, I don't know why they would, you know, I guess they just wanted to save some of that stuff so they could build hype later. But honestly, I think getting the hype train going early is beneficial rather than leaving it to the last second. So...
Should we talk a bit about Zelda then?
Yeah, let's talk a bit about Zelda. Our experience with Zelda is mainly with 3D
mixed.
ones. It's I guess mixed. But we, in general, we've played 3D Zeldas, yeah?
The only top-down ones that we've really sunk our teeth into really are the DS ones.
Yeah, and those aren't really top-down.
And I've played quite a lot of Minish Cap.
Those aren't really top-down, the DS ones. They're more of an
Really?
they're an isometric, like they're kind of an angled perspective, in the same way that like Pokemon X and Y is kind of like that. It's not really top-down, you know?
But what do you think from the trailers?
I am really excited.
Because we're not massive Link to the Past fans.
No, and
like most people.
And we haven't really had enough experience with that game to really feel nostalgia, because we never played it at the time and stuff like that. We have access to it on Virtual Console, but I never really feel the need to go to it. Because it's very intimidating, like the difficulty level and that kind of thing. I definitely need to play it. It's one of those things like on my bucket list that one day I should play and finish Link to the Past. But this seems like something that is introducing a lot of crazy ideas similar to Mario. Not as many, but I do like every time they introduce these new mechanics into Zelda, and they do kind of try and base a lot of their games around singular mechanics.
Just to clarify, but apparently you can like choose the order you do the dungeons, and you like rent your weapons or something.
Yeah,
is this right?
That is correct. So essentially what you do is you can go and decide from the shopkeeper, who is a rabbit who apparently looks like Nabbit, but apparently there's no, similarities whatsoever.
No, they were on the same floor.
Yeah, they were on the same floor.
Yeah.
So they were working together. But anyway,
Some people
you go to
have said that.
You go to that shop and you basically decide, oh, look at this, I want to take the bow, and the bow will give you access to a certain dungeon, and you'll be able to go there and you'll be able to use it.
I take it there's some sort of switch you have to hit that opens the door to the dungeon. You can't just walk into the dungeon by accident and be like, oh, shit, not got my bow, better go.
I mean, I would assume that's the case. That, or you walk into the dungeon and you can't progress past the first room without an item or something to that effect. That probably makes the most sense. And apparently, if you are renting items, if you die, you lose that rented item and you have to go back to the shop and pay more money to rent it out again. So there is this kind
More
of thing.
punishment for death.
Yeah, I mean, there's this thing they're playing with the rented items that, sure, you could go take on this dungeon with this item, but that dungeon may be really hard, and if you don't get through it and you die, you have to gonna pay for this item again to go back and try and get further. So it's very interesting, kind of much more difficulty-oriented way of approaching things, which is very similar to Link to the Past, because that game's fucking hard. So I guess keeping with tradition in that way.
And what do you think of the new mechanic that Nintendo's been pushing quite hard, where you become 2D stylized Link on the wall, straight out of Wind Waker, walking along the wall like a piece of artwork, and then you can like go around the corner, pop in, pop out. What do you think of that?
I really like that they've implemented the Wind Waker kind of art style into that.
I love that art style.
Yeah.
It's incredible. When you're like looking at the stained glass windows from Wind Waker, it's all that exact same art style.
Definitely. I feel like that's a really cool thing. And it's weird when you think like the switch that it's making from the 3D model they have for Link is much more based on like the original Legend of Zelda, and the artwork from the original Legend of Zelda is what that Link looks like, because he has the brown hair and his face looks kind of different to the traditional Link we see in 3D games these days.
There was a bit of shock that the Link they announced for Smash Brothers wasn't this one that's going to appear in Link Between Worlds, and that they're going back to Wind Waker Link.
No, I don't think that's too much of a shock.
No? Isn't this the new Link they're going to go with for a bit?
I think there's a lot of cachet in Wind Waker Link, in Toon Link, and obviously you have to have the kind of mainline 3D console Link, so you're not going to have 3 versions of the same character in a Smash Brothers game, which would be a little bit absurd. So I understand why they would make that decision, just because those characters are much more popular, but it'd be cool to see maybe some kind of power-up that turns Link into this form of himself in the game. I think that would be a neat thing, definitely. That's potential. But other than that, is there anything else that you're really excited about with Link Between Worlds?
I'm just excited to sit down with a new Zelda and just play through it, really. It's been quite a long time since Skyward Sword.
Yeah, definitely.
There's not been anything in between, really, unless I'm blanking right now.
Nope, nothing since Skyward Sword. This is the first thing, unless you count the Wind Waker HD remake, or the Ocarina of Time 3D. Actually, I think Ocarina of Time 3D came out before Skyward Sword.
I think so as well, yeah.
Yeah. So,
but no, I'm almost definitely day one for both of these, I'm thinking. Gonna pick it up.
Gotta go for it.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm sure that we will bring you our impressions of those games as soon as they come out and as soon as we have formulated them. But that is going to be it for today's show. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and you can give us feedback, of course, in the comments down below. And if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, you can send them to us at our email address, which I am making up right now. And we'd be happy to answer those. So that's going to be it. So thank you very much, Bally, for joining me.
No problem.
And I guess that we will see you guys in a couple of weeks. Until then, have a powerful day.
Bye.